Okay, where did we end off with 2014? Because it's been a while. End of 2014 would be Shadol and BA?
When we last left off, the game had just
okay.
seen its most impactful shakeup ever. With the release of Duelist Alliance and the start of the Arc 5 era, Shadol and Burning Abyss would overnight shift what the expectation was for a meta archetype to be able to achieve using its in-archetype pieces, providing both power and recursion between their bosses and power play cards. Cliffort was also recently introduced near the end of 2014 to provide the first meta pendulum strategy, utilizing the mechanic to provide tribute fodder for their bosses, with other new archetypes like Tellarknight just outside of the meta, unfortunately failing due to the shift in the game's design as a whole. With that said,
okay, I know where we are. We have Shadol, BA, Clifford, kind of like the stun deck of the format, but pretty strong. Tellarknight, kind of like the stun deck of the format, but bad. That's what we have.
There would be some clear outliers in power with this shift in design, and more specifically, a single card that made certain matchups completely unbalanced. So a banlist update would be put in place right after the start of the year on January 1st. And while there would only be a couple of hits, the banlist would absolutely be filled with cards returning to the game for the first time in years. Newly banned would be Super Polymerization, as the card being completely unrespondable was proving to be a serious problem in the case of Shadol specifically, as it could effectively delete any boss monster from the field in Archetype, as well as being a blowout side deck card going into the Shadol matchup. Newly limited were Artifact Moral Talk, being the power play of the Artifact engine, Dark Strike Fighter, returning from the banned section with a main phase 1 locked hard once per turn errata, cratering its power level but still giving it a place in certain strategies, and Snatch Steal, which set off every alarm in the community with its return.
I forgot about this. That was so nuts. Doesn't this go back to ban, like one banlist later?
Understand that a permanent monster steal was a massive power swing, especially for the time period, and as such would immediately move from here to be a staple card in literally every deck of the format, which we'll see very soon. Newly semi-limited, and all returning from one, were Honest, Yugioh Guardian, and Dark Hole, all seeing decreased usage in the meta, with Dark Hole turning heads initially, but being disregarded due to the graveyard triggers of almost every meta deck. Lastly, unlimited were Gale the Whirlwind, Abyss Gund, Reborn Tengu, Reasoning, and Transmigration Prophecy, all seeing themselves.
I will say though, looking back at it, I do feel like I'm trying to imagine the format, right? Shadol, BA, Clifford, Tellarknight, like I can't really blame them for thinking Snatch Steal was okay. I feel like it could be, you know. I'm thinking of it right now, and I'm like, why was Snatch Steal that much of a problem?
To varying degrees being power crept by the modern metagame, though some here would find new homes very soon. All in all, this list only had 2 hits, both seemingly targeted at Shadol, which was interesting as by recent results, Burning Abyss had already overtaken Shadol's top deck position, which would lead most players to closely watch the next couple.
By the way, we are in a phase right now where early 2015 Josh was giga coping on Shadols, right? I won my first YCS in 2014 with Shadols. I loved Shadols. I coped the entire format that Shadol was better than all the other decks, which in hindsight probably wasn't true. But I played Shadol all the way through this format.
Of releases to see if Burning Abyss would run away with the format or if a new threat would give them a true challenge.
Secrets of Eternity.
Release date, January 16th, 2015. Set type, core set. Major strategies, Infernoid, Cliffort, Burning Abyss. Impact, minor buffs, and a preview of what's to come. Secrets of Eternity would be the first set of 2015, and though many of its pieces would see play over the remainder of the era, a lot of what was introduced here would take some time to actually see major success. The new archetype in question here was Infernoid, a series of fire fiend monsters that all share the same summon condition of banishing a number of Infernoids from hand or grave to summon themselves, while the total level of Infernoids you control is 8 or lower, with the level 4 and lowers taking 1, the 5 through 8s taking 2, and the 9 and ups taking 3. All of the 8 and lowers also share a similar effect to, on quick effect, tribute a monster to banish a card from the opponent's grave, with each also having their own unique effect, with Antra bouncing an opponent's card, Harmadic popping a monster, Paltrulia popping a spell trap, Piatti hand-ripping on battle damage dealt, Saitsamus banishing a card at the end of the battle phase it attacks in, and a Tondel able to attack twice if it destroys something in battle. The most unique of the bunch, though.
If you put a gun to my head and say, name the secondary effects of the Infernoids, I die. I might barely be able to tell you how many Infernoids you need to banish to summon them. I think it's level 1 to 4 need 1 banish, level 5 and 6 need 2 banishes. No, 5 through 8 need 2 banishes, and the big ones need 3. That's what I know. The secondary effects of all of them, dude, the most confusing shit at the time was that some of them could banish stuff from your opponent's graveyard as a quick effect, and some of them could only do it on your own effect, right? Like they say like, oh, tribute 1 to banish. Yeah, and some of them had it as a quick effect. I never knew. I always had to pick them up and read them whenever I played them in tournaments to make sure they couldn't like banish. Yeah. Small ones are quick effect only on the opponent's turn. See, like, come on, man.
Was undoubtedly a Nunku, a level 10 that nukes all monsters other than itself on summon and contribute a monster to negate a spell or trap and banish it once per turn. They also received a couple of void spell traps to support the archetype, with the only relevant one being Seer, able to make one Infernoid unaffected by opponent's effects that turn and could be banished from grave to keep one alive once. This archetype clearly had a lot going for it in the current meta landscape, DD Crow on most bodies, able to swarm themselves off the previous wave's corpses, and a varied forms of removal and interaction, but the major downside was that while they could swarm over and over again easily, getting that first swarm out was extremely resource intensive. Because of their summon conditions, you either had to banish your entire opening to set up decently, or relied on supplemental engines like Lightsworn to set up the grave decently enough to make an early push, which then would get shot in the foot simply by their restriction of only being able to get out one boss monster, as a Nunku would nuke your other pieces on summon, and by its level being 10, lock you from summoning the other bodies to use its tribute effect with. Because of this, Infernoid would be relegated to the rogue level for now, but would absolutely be an archetype to keep an eye on moving forward into the era. Cliffort would see a secondary wave in Monolith, the other vanilla scale, able to draw one for each Klee you tributed in the end phase, Stealth, who on tribute summon bounces a card, locking responses from the opponent, and Requilate, a temporary negate of any level 4 or lower normal summon or a 5 or higher special summon, which in turn would reset the Klee stat lines. Each of these would find their home in the current version of Klee, with Monolith being standardly a 1 of high scale searchable with Summoner's Art, Stealth being a way to clear the opponent's board without responses by tributing over Helix and Carrier, and Requilate would see play effectively as a way to temporarily stun players while setting up your own stat lines while keeping the immunity effects of your Klees. Burning Abyss would receive its third wave of TCG exclusive support, being Farfa, able to temporarily banish a monster on field until the end phase, Libic, able to summon a level 3 fiend from hand with its effects negated, Kog'Na, able to send a Burning Abyss spell trap from deck to grave, Malakota, a ritual who was too bad to even matter, and its ritual spell Good and Evil of the Burning Abyss, which had the added effect of being able to banish itself from grave to send a BA from hand to grave and search a BA card from deck to hand. This wave would do a lot for the deck by being better effects on the whole than the previous waves, although the new boss was borderline unplayable by being a ritual monster. However, thanks to Kog'Na specifically, Good and Evil would actually find itself teched into some BA builds as both a way to trigger the hand BAs and search for Fire Lake from the deck, which was unquestionably the best BA spell trap. There was also 3 more archetypes introduced here, all seemingly out of place as they lack the remainder of their archetypes, being that of Yosenju, Nekroz, and Ritual Beast. As this
Dude, I forgot we're going to be looking at Nekroz today. Pog Champion, I forgot. That's so dope. Yeah, they released this before Nekroz. This is the first Nekroz card in the TCG.
This set came out in the OCG after the next pack we were set to receive did, so as such, these pieces will be set aside to talk about in an upcoming section. On to the one-offs. Performapal Part Naga was a 3 scale that could boost a Performapal from the scale, but more importantly was a 3 scale that was searchable with the previously released King of the Feral Imps, a point that would become more and more relevant over the coming months. Similarly, Gigabyte was another King target that could special summon itself if you control the spellcaster and floats into a differently named 1500 and 200 stat monster on destruction, also seeing relevance later in the year. Unizombie could, by discarding a card or dumping a zombie from deck to grave, boost a monster's level by 1 once per turn for each method, being a critical setup piece for zombie strategies. Gem Knight Lady Lapis Lazuli was a fusion of the vanilla Lapis and another Gem Knight.
Dude, did you really unpin the video link and pin the Secret of Eternity? The Secret of it? Dude, no! Keep the video pinned. What are you doing?
Able to dump a Gem Knight from deck or extra to burn the opponent for each special summoned monster on the field, only being able to be special summoned once per turn to avoid burn loops, but given time, Gem Knight could find a way around that restriction. Stellar Knight Constellar Diamond was a 3 material rank 5 that could also be summoned over a Stellar Knight Exceed in the main phase 2, blocking sending cards from deck to grave and banishing any card returned from grave to hand, able to detach to negate an activated Dark Monster effect and destroy it. This card was so clearly designed to be a catch-all to stop Shaddoll and Burning Abyss in the meta that it's not even funny, able to be easily made in Stellar Knight from turn 2 onwards, or any any deck for that matter, as long as they could put up 3 materials needed to summon Deltaros. Soul Transition could tribute a level 4 normal summon monster to draw 2 if you control no special summon monsters, which really should have been labeled a Klee card with how clearly targeted to the strategy it was. Lastly, Blaze Accelerator Reload was a continuous trap that could be considered Tri-Blaze Accelerator on field, could dump a Volcanic from hand to draw 1, and could be banished from grave to send a Volcanic from deck to grave. While all of this may seem niche and just a way to get the old GX archetype some more playability, Reload would actually move to spawn an entire new deck type to the meta with Volcanics, which we'll cover with an upcoming YCS. All in all, Secrets of Eternity was a mixed bag on release, not having much impact in the short term, but over the course of the year would have its pieces become more and more relevant with the release.
I mean, it's a lot of good stuff still, overall, yeah. Immediately, like, just Clifford support and some new BAs, but
of further cards. This wouldn't be the only release though heading into the first YCS of the year, as the year's first structure deck would also drop before then to help shake up the format just a little more.
Wait, is that Dark Law? Oh no,
Hero
it's Dark
Strike.
Law.
Release date, January 30th, 2015. Set type, structure deck.
No.
Major strategies, hero. Impact, how do I get through this section
Major strategy cringe
without being biased? The Hero Strike structure deck would once again usher in a return of hero support to the game, as is tradition at least once in an era. This time would bring the introduction of a massive overhaul to the masked hero sub-archetype introduced at the start of Zexal, bringing a new supporting elemental hero in the form of Shadow Mist, able to search a change quick play spell on special summon, and a hero when sent to grave. A couple of new masked hero support spells in Form Change, which lets you tag a masked hero into a different attributed one, Mask Change 2, which allows you to mask change any monster at the cost of a discard, and Mask Charge to recur back a hero and a change quick play. And last but not least, new masked heroes in Koga, a light target that boosts by 500 for each opponent's monster and can banish a hero from grave to drop an opponent's monster.
It's so funny if you think about the fact that they all came out at the same time, and like the difference in power level between these three is insane.
By its attack, Divine Wind, a wind target that is battle destruction immune, locks the opponent to one monster attacking a turn, and draws on destroying something in battle, and the big man himself, Dark Law, a dark target that puts a one-sided macro effect on the opponent and banishes a card from their hand if they add a card from deck to hand. It should be no secret that these are my personal favorite cards in the history of the game, so I'll try and be as unbiased as I possibly can. On initial release, the masked hero pieces looked absolutely wonderful in terms of taking hero in a new direction that was potentially meta-relevant, namely on the back of Dark Law himself. By special summoning Shadow Mist through a Hero Lives, Summoner Monk, or a more niche option like Goblin Burg or 10 Goldfish, you could search for the mask change you need to convert her into Dark Law the following turn, which would then net you a hero search. While having immediate applications, Masked Hero for now would not see much meta play, though an interesting place would be found for the new heroes almost immediately. Because,
I mean, didn't people play Mask Change 2 in BA, like off rip? I feel like they did.
The newly released Mask Change 2 could change any monster into a masked hero, there was no need to run all of the hero cards, as you could instead tech it in your side deck in any predominantly dark strategy, like Burning Abyss or Shadal, to make Dark Law out of any dark body. Was this super relevant? At this point in time, not really, but it was a solid option playing
the Law himself. Thank you for the 7 months, appreciate that. Keep doing what you're doing.
Into Burning Abyss specifically because the only in-archetyped outs that they played were Firelake and Virgil, as Dante couldn't boost itself under Dark Law, which meant that they had lost substantial resources to out the macro effect. YCS Charleston would be held the same weekend.
I mean, I guess if they have nothing but Dark Law, you can like make a downer in main phase 2, right? And that's bigger than the Dark Law, so you run over it next turn.
Being a half-sealed event, and following the release of Secrets, a couple of things would shift, but the overall vibe would remain the same.
Look, there's one Shadal Coper with me.
With the additions of Farfa and Libic, Burning Abyss would solidify its placement as the top deck of the format, also taking first place piloted by Jonathan Castillo to top 16, who did not make his particular list public. Clifford adopted its new pieces immediately, seeing 1 Monolith and 2 to 3 Stealth added into topping lists alongside the new draw tool of Soul Transition, being effectively Pot of Greed for Clifford specifically. Teller Knight would continue to see roughly tier 2 to 3 success rates, with Diamond specifically giving them a better matchup into Burning Abyss, but still being substantially behind the top deck. Shadal had taken a serious fall from grace here, being the only heavily affected deck of the previous ban list in addition to receiving no new relevant support from Secrets like the other strategies had, leaving it in a position to adapt or die moving into the new format. However, the list that turned the most heads unquestionably was Volcanic, which shockingly went completely undefeated in the Swiss rounds. Ooh. Reload had...
Yeah, that deck looks good. I don't remember in Europe, I don't remember anyone playing
turned the Volcanic pieces into an insane value engine, discarding shells for the draws and searching another right after, Scattershot being the dump from deck target to both board nuke and burn the opponent for 1500 a go, and Royal Firestorm guards being present to reload the engine for further shots. Magic Planter would also see major success because of this, able to send a reload to grave to draw 2, then fire the reload from grave to scattershot away a board.
Side deck? I mean, it's very much worth noting that at this point in time, if you think about it, like Mag C against a lot of the decks in the format isn't that good. It's dead against Clifford. It's not good against Satellar. It's okay against Shaddoll, and it's only really good against BA out of the top 4 decks or something.
Strategy would be a rogue option for the next few months, always popping up as a one-of in top cuts at most, usually in tandem with another strategy for added power. Regardless, Charleston had laid the groundwork for an interesting format to develop for sure, but that was all about to be completely upended. For the 5th time in the game's history, we were about to enter a Tier 0 format, and judging by how certain aspects of the set played out, Konami knew exactly what they were doing with this one.
Dude, does anyone remember the Secret Forces? I'm gonna have to rewatch that clip. Hold up.
The Secret Forces. Release date February 13th, 2015. Set type deck building set. Major strategies Yosenju, Nekroz, Ritual Beast. Impact wait, you can make rituals not suck? While this kind of pack was not explicitly called this at the time, in reality, the Secret Forces would be the prototype for what eventually became known as the deck building set, a set that introduces 3 archetypes, whether it be a new take on an older archetype or a completely original one, and jam a whole ton of support to get the strategy on the ground running out the gate with a couple of additional pieces trickled out over the coming core sets. As such, this set would introduce 3 new archetypes we were actually introduced to back in Secrets, with each being a unique take on a previous mechanic. Yosenju would be the first, and arguably the worst, of the 3, a series of beast warriors focused on chaining multiple normal summons together and bouncing back to hand at the end of the turn. This included the Kamas, each able to perform an additional Yosenju normal on normal summon, with 1 able to bounce a monster to hand if you controlled another Yosenju, 2 able to attack directly for half damage, and 3 able to search a Yosenju when a Yosenju deals battle damage, all returning to hand in the end phase if normal summoned. They also received Sujik back in Secrets, able to boost a Yosenju by 1,000 for the turn or
Yosenju was basically just bad. But they turned into some kind of weird stun deck eventually, where they would play a lot of floodgates.
Be used from the hand as a 1,000 boost battle trick, also returning to hand the turn it's normaled. While a decent theme, it entirely gets disjointed by the introduction of pendulums here too, with the Senshus providing skills
These
3
didn't
to
make
11,
any sense.
and Daibok being a level 10 that bounces 2 cards on normal or pendulum summon, returning to the hand in the end phase of the turn it's specialed. Lastly, Training Grounds is their archetypal gateway, gaining a counter on each Yosenju summon and able to remove 3 to search a Yosenju card, and Secret Move is the archetypal Omni-Negate counter trap, only usable if you control only Yosenjus. While a fun strategy for the casual level, Yosenju here suffered from a severe lack of focus, as it seemed like the Kamas and the Pendulums were at odds with each other in terms of how the deck was actually supposed to be played, being a pendulum spam strategy or a normal summon swarm strategy, as if you pendulum summoned the Kamas, their return to hand effects would not trigger, and they'd be sitting ducks for the following turn, leaving Yosenju as easily the least playable of the 3 strategies. The Ritual Beasts were up next, a series that actually was made of 2 different sub-archetypes, being the Ritual Beast Tamers, a series of psychics aimed at tutoring out another Ritual Beast, with Laura reviving a Ritual Beast on normal, Elder giving you an extra normal summon, and Wen returning a banished Ritual Beast to field, and the Spiritual Beasts, a series of animal companions, including Apelio, who can banish an RB to boost all RBs by 500 that turn, Petalfin, who banishes an RB in hand to bounce a card, Kanahawk, who banishes an RB from deck to Gold Sark, and Rampingu from Secrets, who banishes an RB from extra deck to dump a same typed RB from deck to grave. The archetype's primary gimmick was Contact Fusion, able to make any of their fusions by banishing a Tamer and a Spiritual Beast, with all sharing an effect to return to the extra deck to summon a banished Tamer and Spiritual Beast on quick effect, with Ulti Apelio being immune to other cards for its attacks, Ulti Petalfin unable to die by card effect, and Ulti Kanahawk able to return 2 banished RBs to grave to search an RB card. All the RB main deck monsters also had the stipulation of being special summonable once per turn, so while you could theoretically tag between your fusions and them over and over again, in practice there was a limit to how many times you could do it. As for their spell traps, Bond lets you contact fuse on a quick play spell.
Ritual Beast is the kind of deck that at the time, like, I mean, we're about to talk about Nekroz. I was a Nekroz main when that deck came out. I never played Ritual Beast. Looking back, I wish I played it at least, like, maybe not at the YCSs or something, but like at a lower level, like regionals type of stuff. I wish I picked up Ritual Beast and played it, because it does look really fun.
Using any 2
And it's not
RBs
bad.
rather than
It's like,
needing
it's
specific
solid.
types. Steeds lets you non-target pop cards up to the number of RBs you control, and Ambush from Secrets lets you summon back a Grave or Banished Tamer and Spiritual Beast. A fun little fact about Ulti Kanahawk's effect specifically. Because of wording, his search effect does not have to return both targets to grave to get the search off. It just needs to return at least one, which means you can actually chain its tag out effect to the search to resummon one of the targets and preserve your resources. Incidentally, did you also know that Ulti Kanahawk is not a hard once per turn? Ritual Beasts would absolutely abuse this interaction as much as they possibly could to chain together searches in excess for more pieces to continue search.
So basically, the way it works is if you have 2 banished, and you try to tag out, you need 3 different ones banished. I don't know, they don't need to be different, but you need 3 banished ones. You go Kanahawk effect to, which one is Kanahawk effect to search, which is target 2 of them to put them back into the grave to search. But before it resolves, you chain the other effect of Kanahawk to summon back. And so out of those 3 monsters, you've targeted 2 to return. You target the last one and then one of the other 2 that you've already targeted. Special summon back the 2, then you return only 1, and then you still get to search.
Chains, as well as interaction points.
What do you mean pre-watched? I was there.
And set up for future plays in
I pre-watched it in 2015.
And because of the sheer versatility of this, Ritual Beast would actually be a contender in the upcoming metagame, mostly off the back of Steed's non-targeting pop being extremely useful for one specific matchup, which would lead the deck into a tier 3 position for the coming months. Lastly, and undoubtedly the most important, Nekroz was a series of ritual monsters aimed at being the most generically accessible.
Love Nekroz, man. Give me Nekroz support, like actual Nekroz support. I need it
on rituals so far, with each of the ritual monsters having some effect in hand requiring them to be discarded and another on the field, usually
some of my favorite decks of all time.
Aimed at interacting with extra deck summoned monsters. Clausulus discards itself to search a Nekroz spell trap and can drop an extra deck summoned monster to 0 and negate its effects on a quick effect. Bryonic discards itself to search a Nekroz monster and can bounce up to 2 extra deck summoned monsters once per turn. Trishula can discard itself to negate anything that targets a Nekroz and banish a card from hand, field, and grave on summon. Yes, you do have to hit one of each or none at all. Unicorn can discard itself to recur a Nekroz from grave to hand and is skill drained for extra deck summoned monsters. Valkyris can discard itself and banish a Nekroz in grave to negate an attack and end the battle phase, and contribute up to 2 monsters on field or in hand to draw that many cards. And Gungnir from Secret can discard itself to make a Nekroz immune to destruction that turn, and can discard a Nekroz to pop a card on field. As for their ritual spells, each has an effect to banish itself and a Nekroz monster from grave while you control no monsters to search another Nekroz spell, with each also having its own unique gimmick, with Mirror able to banish Nekroz tributes from grave for the summon, Kaleidoscope able to use extra deck monsters for the tributes, also able to summon out multiple Nekroz off of one monster tributed, and Cycle from Secrets able to ritual summon a Nekroz that's in the graveyard. Lastly would be the singular non-ritual Nekroz that was important at this stage, Shurit, able to consider itself the whole tribute for a Nekroz ritual summon and searches a warrior Nekroz ritual monster when tributed. It's these, don't ask. So in case it wasn't clear, Nekroz was one of the most consistent decks to ever exist in the game's history up until this point. Thanks to years of ritual support waiting in the backlog like Manju, Preparation of Rites, and even the recent Herald of Arclight for usage with Kaleidoscope, you had easy access to literally every single card in the archetype thanks to Bryonic.
What about Great Sork and Exa? Those didn't become relevant until later. But yeah.
Who could search any monster in the archetype, which included Clausulus, who could search the spells. While their power level would be seemingly lacking due to mostly being reactive effects, this was all just on paper, as regularly a Nekroz player could set up their resources on the first turn to block you from advancing even slightly, and completely run you out of the game after with proper resource management.
Nekroz, basically, outside of Floodgates, Nekroz has answers to everything, can grind incredibly well, and cannot die because of Valkyris. That was their thing, right? Like, the Nekroz mirror match, and this is the most important interaction. We're going to talk about Jinlock in a second, but like the most important interaction for the Nekroz format is the Trishula interactions, where in order to banish a card from field, grave, and hand, you need to hit one out of every location. So what people would do in Nekroz mirrors is you would try to empty your entire field. So you would pass on nothing. The perfect Nekroz end board, first of all, Nekroz would often blind second, but literally the perfect end board of Nekroz was nothing. You would pass on no cards on the board in order to not get trished by your opponent. Because if you had no cards on the field, they could not trish you. And you couldn't die because you would set up a Valkyris in your hand. Because Nekroz can basically draw and search however much you want, and this is further facilitated by the fact that the Nekroz ritual spells search you more Nekroz ritual spells if you have no monsters, right? And so The ideal play was to like summon, you would normally summon a Manju or a Senju on turn 1. You would put a Nekroz of Unicorn next to it with a Kaleidoscope by sending Herald of the Arclight. Then you would summon Valkyris with one of the other ritual spells. And then you would go rank 4 into Daigusto Emerald or Lavalval Chain, but that's a different story. But Daigusto Emerald, shuffle back 3, draw 1, and then you would go Valkyris, tribute your Emerald and the Valkyris itself to draw 2 more, to have like a full hand. You had an empty board, so next turn you can banish your ritual spells to get more ritual spells and keep playing. So it was a very grindy back and forth between who could actually push through enough damage through the Valkyrises, because the Valkyris in hand also stops your opponent's battle phase.
The player base knew Nekroz was going to be tier 0 immediately on release, and seemingly Konami did too, as the most important piece of the deck, Bryonic, was seemingly a lot harder to pull than any of the other cards. This particular pack was structured as a 5-card pack with
I think this probably goes down in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! As the craziest short print ever. I can't think of the top of my head of anything else that comes close to this particular moment in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, because these sets are supposed to have, these side sets usually didn't have that expensive stuff in them, because it's like 4 supers and a secret in every pack. So you would expect like, hey, you know, the set has like, I don't know how many different cards, like 60 or something, like only a couple secrets, like maybe 20 secret rares or something. I don't remember exactly, but you would think like, hey, you know, like I'm gonna pull some of these and it's fine, right? You get one freaking, what was it? One Brionac per like case or something, like 12 boxes for a Brionac or something. So what was expected to be like somewhat available suddenly went from like the Brionac was like $150 or something like that.
4 super rares and 1 secret rare in every pack, which naturally leads one to believe that the 20 secret rares would each have a similar chance to be pulled in that spot, but that was not the case. Bryonic, Trishula, and Valkyris were short printed very heavily, with all 3 seemingly being pulled at a rate of roughly 1 per every 6 boxes, which while not nearly...
I think it was, I don't know, I remember it differently, maybe I'm misremembering it, but I think Trishula wasn't that short. I think Brionac was super short, and Valkyris was pretty short, and Trishula was kind of short. I don't know.
As bad as Crush Card Virus back in the original.
Maybe Trishula was only cheaper because you would only play 1 or 2 copies. Maybe that's what I'm misremembering. Maybe they were similarly short printed, but Trishula didn't feel as short because you only needed 1 or 2, which obviously for the market meant like it wasn't as expensive. Maybe that's why. But it was always 3 Brionac, no matter which version you played. It was always 3 Brionac. It was 2 to 3 Valkyris. In the beginning, it was often 2, but I think the ideal number is 3. And then Trishula was initially a 1-of, and then eventually, because Trishula is the one that stops targeting, eventually people started playing 2 Trishulas, because then you could protect your Trishula from something like Effect Veiler, right? Because you need to play 2 Trishulas for that, to summon one, activate it, and then if they Veiler it, you have the second Trishula in hand to stop the Veiler. That's when people started playing 2 Trishes.
Still absolutely ludicrous for a deck everyone knew was going to be tier 1, if not tier 0. As such, prices skyrocketed, with Bryonic at its peak pulling a price tag of around $150, with Valk and Trish also being extremely pricey, but not quite on the same level as Bryonic, and the results from the next YCS would do nothing to help that price point.
This always reminds me of this. This is a goated clip. We're gonna watch it in its entirety. Oh man, this is one of the best Yugi 2 Wing videos out there. There's no better one. It's insane. It's so funny. It's so funny. It didn't feel as funny at the time, but it's very funny. Watch them pull pink dolphins.
YCS Tacoma would be the first event held after the Secret Forces release on February 15th, and though it was a half-sealed event, Nekroz would prove to be an absolutely dominant strategy right out the gate. The consistency of the deck would prove to be absolutely incredible, able to handle just about any scenario thrown at it, but there was one more specific...
Yeah, this is where we have to talk about the Jin. Like this format, which honestly could have been one of the... it is still one of the best Yu-Gi-Oh formats, but like it's it probably would be close to the best format ever if it didn't have freaking Jin in it.
Interaction
Stupid-ass
Nekroz
card,
had
man.
that would prove to be insanely problematic. Released all the way back in 2009, Jin, Releaser of Rituals, could be used from grave as ritual cost and
I
gave
hate
any
this
monster
guy.
summoned using it a one-sided special summon floodgate for as long as it was on the field. Up until now,
So the problem about Jin was it was accessible through Lavalval chain, right? So the spot I told you guys earlier a second ago, normal summon Manju or Senju, summon Unicorn, summon Valk. You can make Daigusto Emerald. You can also summon Lavalval chain instead. And Lavalval chain sends Jin. You go for another ritual summon. You banish Jin to summon a Clausulus, which is also level 3. And as long as that Clausulus is on the board, face up, your opponent cannot special summon, which is super cringe, obviously, when Nekroz is a deck that only really special summons. So in the Nekroz mirror, it's basically GG. The problem with that whole thing is basically it forced people to play outs to the Jin lock in the main deck, which were usually rather bad cards. Like we see in this list, it's Book of Eclipse and Book of Moon. There's a lot of other things that people were doing to out the Jin lock. The weird dynamic that it created was the fact that ideally, like unironically, going for the Jin lock, going first. I remember specifically, I did not often go for the Jin lock because of the following situation. Basically, when you go first in the Nekroz mirror, or in general with Nekroz, but mostly in the mirror match, you have to guess, basically, if your opponent has an out to the Jin lock. Because guess what? If you go for the Jin lock and your opponent has an out, you get destroyed. Because if they have Book of Eclipse or they have Book of Moon, they out your Jin lock and they can trish you because you now have a card on the board. So the whole idea of leaving an empty field was out of the window, basically, right? Like because you didn't want to get Trishalad, you know. So it was a super toxic like environment, because sometimes you would go for the Jin lock, your opponent would have an out and you would get trished and you would lose. And if they didn't have an out, you just won the game, because Nekroz can always kill on the follow-up turn, pretty much, right? And on top of all that, the most cringe thing of all of these is that there's a bunch of different ways to keep your Jin lock alive. Because guess what? There's different outs to it that people played, like Book of Moon targets. Trishula negates targeting on Nekroz cards, so Trishula negates Book of Moon. Raigeki, which is in this list as well, destroys, which I think Gungnir you can discard to prevent a Nekroz from being destroyed. So once again, when you built your deck, you'd have to like guess what kind of cards your opponent had. And this becomes even worse when people start playing. There's actually this period in time, I'm sure we're going to talk about it in just a moment, where people start playing Rhoda targets to out the Jin lock. It's like this Giga mini game where there's 2 or 3 Rhodas. I think Rhoda goes to 2 eventually during these times. But you always, there's a bunch of different ways to out the Jin lock with warriors. There's Bullblader, which I think attacks and then destroys it by card effect. There's DD Warrior Lady, which crashes and then banishes it. There's Exiled Force, which destroys, targets it and destroys it. So it gets stopped by Trish and Gungnir, but you don't lose your battle phase. And there was this whole mini game of, because Nekroz can search so many cards on the first turn, right? If your opponent would go for the Jin lock, they would usually search 1 or 2 cards that would protect it, right? But they would have to decide, you know, am I going to search Trishula? Am I going to search Gungnir? Or maybe am I going to search Valkyrus to stop, because Valkyrus can stop attacks, right? So if you go for DD Warrior Lady and they have Valkyrus, well, tough luck, you know, doesn't work. You die next turn. If you go for Exiled Force and they have Trishula or Gungnir, well, you've wasted your normal summon and the Jin lock is still there, right? And so it's such a cringe dynamic in a format that otherwise would be so dope, like so dope. And this is why Book of Eclipse was the one of choice in early Nekroz format, because Book of Eclipse was the only one that basically there was no Nekroz card that would stop it, because it didn't target and it didn't destroy, right? And so Book of Eclipse was the go-to one, and it also left it on the board so you can trish them after, right? So this is why Book of Eclipse was a thing. Were hand traps non-existent? Or were cards like Maxi, Veiler, and DD Crow not played? So Maxi, as you can see, is in the side deck, but Maxi doesn't stop the Jin lock anyways. Unironically, Maxi in this format is like fine in the mirror match. Some people mained it. But there's a lot of matchups in the format it isn't that good against. Like at this point in time, people play a good amount of Cleaford, where Maxi does nothing. Satellar Knight with a lot of Floodgates was also being played. So cards like Maxi and Shared Right, which were really good against Nekroz, were mostly side decked. Unless you wanted to make your deck better in the mirror match.
It was believed that Ritual was too slow a mechanic to ever use it reliably, but with the release of Nekroz, they would utilize the level 4 normal summon searchers of Manju and Senju to use alongside Nekroz of Unicorn to access Lavalval Chain, which in turn would dump the Jin from deck to use as material for the summon of a monster.
I guess DD Crow is another card that could have been played. I don't remember people really playing DD Crow. Now that you say it, maybe DD Crow was a little bit overlooked, because it feels like DD Crow is solid to prevent the Jin lock. But the DD Crow has the same problem where you couldn't really main deck it, right? Like, it's terrible against... Like, Book of Eclipse at least would help you out like a Floodgate from Cleaford sometimes, I think. The same is true about MST, by the way. MST is a terrible card in the Nekroz mirror. It was always the big question, because the main... literally, Nekroz was so powerful, the only way that other decks had to beat it were Floodgates. So, and there were a bunch of decks that were... Because Nekroz was so expensive, a lot of people played Satellar or Cleaford or anything like that. They all relied on Floodgate, like Mistake, and so on and so forth, right? Like, those were really popular. So that's why we still main decked MST very often, but it never felt good to play MST because it's completely dead in the mirror match. That's one instance, by the way. This is not yet the case, but this is why I was really happy when Archfiend Eccentric came out. It came out at some point during Nekroz format. I don't remember exactly when. I think it's 2015. It should happen in this video. But one reason why Archfiend Eccentric was so cool was because it could out monsters and spell traps. And you can also tribute it for Valkyris if you don't need it, because Valkyris can tribute any monsters to draw cards. So I want to say I topped the YCS with main deck Archfiend Eccentric in Nekroz. Maybe I cited it, but I know that I played it.
Like Clausulus, which, as it turned out, would be incredibly easy to pull off reliably given how consistent the deck was. The Jin lock, as it became known, would be the bane of the format.
This is looking back, this format literally would have been peak perfect. Nothing wrong with it if they just banned Jin at the time of Nekroz release. And it would not have made Nekroz unplayable whatsoever. Like, Nekroz with Jin banned is still the best deck in the game at this point in time, for sure. It would not have hurt the numbers at all in terms of how many they sell or whatever. It would have just made the format less toxic, right?
Common consensus being that a one-sided lock sucked all skill out of the format, which would also lead to one of the most controversial angle shoots in the game's history, which we'll cover soon.
Wait, we're
would
talking
actually
about
move to do fairly well here thanks to being one of the only decks that didn't auto-lose to the Jin lock, as normal summoning a Cleave with Sacrifice equipped was shockingly usually enough to get out of the lock, providing a slower path to a boss on it, or by ensuring that you could use the tribute effect of Carrier.
Oh yeah,
that didn't mean
I said Mistake, but obviously Emptiness and Skill Drain are also here.
Always going to work. There were extremely simple counters to this line like MST and Trishul.
Solid Texture, thank you for the 13 months. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for the support. I do think, I don't know, but my guess is that it's in there, but I have no idea.
Targeting negation, but it was usually consistent enough to get the job done. Burning Abyss was the only other deck to make top cut here, and that was primarily thanks in large part to Farfa, as by temporarily banishing the Jinned monster from the board, a Burning Abyss player could continue their lines as normal, which was still countered by Trishula's negation effect. Keys would win the Abyss.
The thing about BA is that it's unfortunately getting almost completely hard countered by Nekroz, because like all the Nekroz cards just fuck up extra deck monsters, and Trishula is insane against BA. BA would do a different thing, by the way, to outplay Trishula, which is really cool. Like Trap BA was like I want to say the second best deck during this format, probably next to Cleaford. But there was one thing you can do. The good BA players would do something like you would have no cards in hand, or you would have only one card in hand, and when they summon Trishula and activate the effect, you would chain something like Karma Cut to discard the last card in your hand, and then so the Nekroz player, if you have one card in hand and some set cards, you always have to guess, well, do they have a discard trap? Then I can't Trish them because they chain, get rid of the last card in their hand, and then, you know, can't do that. The problem with that is if you played against a good Nekroz player, they could also outplay that, right? Because if the BA player is forced to keep their discard traps in the back row before using them, like because they want to bait the opponent into Trishula, what you can do is you can do something like run over Dante, and then what is the BA player going to do? Like not trigger their floaters? Because if they trigger the Dante to add something back, then they have two cards in hand and they can't dodge the Trishula anymore with a discard trap, right? And so it's actually a very cool matchup. Like I think Trap BA without Floodgates versus Nekroz in this format is really dope.
And in the sealed draft, making it to top 16 with Nekroz, marking the deck's technically first YCS win, leading into the year's Gold Series under a week later.
Oh, backtrack
Premium
my
Gold Return of the Bling. Release date, February 20th, 2015. Set type, import, reprint set. Major strategies, Blackwing, Masked Hero, Galaxy Eyes. Impact, a theorized meta breaker. Return of the Bling would be the second crack at turning the yearly Gold Series sets into an import source for the TCG to receive some cards not yet brought in from the OCG. And for the most part, as usual, these imports were not all that impressive, but would hold some niche applications, such as Absolute King Backjack, a new wave of Blackwing support, Cat Shark, Masked Hero Anki, Rose Lover, and Santa Claus. However, there was one card among these that held legitimate potential. Number 95, Galaxy Eyes Dark Matter Dragon could be overlaid onto any Galaxy Eyes Exceed, and could dump 3 dragons from deck on summon to make the opponent banish 3 monsters from deck.
This guy is still banned, right? Did this guy ever come back? I don't feel like it did.
Able to attack twice in the battle phase by detaching material. With the currently limited Dragon Rulers, Dark Matter was instantly theorized as the perfect way to set up your board for large-scale pushes, being hailed as the return of Dragon Rulers.
So what, I'm trying to remember, like I remember people experimenting with this card. I'm trying to remember how they made it, because it would have been like a rank 8, right? You'd have to like make a rank 8 galaxy thingy and then overlay this over it. What was it? Like, was it the water and earth dragons? Hieratics? That sort of... Yeah, hieratic ruler. I think that's what people were trying to do. Yeah.
To the format, but we'd have to wait and see if it could actually convert into results. In addition to these, a series of currently banned cards would see significant erratas to their effects in order to potentially return to the game on the next ban list. Sinister Serpent received a clause in its effect to banish a Sinister Serpent in gray during the opponent's next end phase, which effectively meant that if you...
These are the worst kind of erratas, by the way. I genuinely, I don't know how I feel about erratas, because sometimes I feel like it's cool, but the ones that... I'm the most frustrated about erratas on cards that even if they were unerrata'd, they would still not see play today, right? Like Sinister Serpent, Yugioh Guardian, those kind of cards. It's just sad when they change those cards, even though Brain Control is another one. Like Brain Control, like Change of Heart is legal, and Brain Control is errata'd, and it's a worse version of Change of Heart. Like it's...
discarded it within a turn of bringing it back, it was gone for good.
I think at this point, I tend to agree with some people in the chat saying like they should just like, if they think the card is too powerful, just leave it banned. And if you want to make a new version of it, just make a new card, right? Just make a retrain, you know, like give it a cool name, make it look like Sinister Serpent a little bit, and give it that new effect, right? I think that would have been a better way to handle it.
Kings would see its trap condition limited to 1 trap a turn rather than all, heavily hampering its FTK potential. Exchange of the Spirit would now require both players to have 15 plus cards engraved to activate rather than just the controller, killing its FTK potential. Ring of Destruction now had to be used on the opponent's turn, could only target their monsters, and can't target something that would burn them for game on activation.
Like this one, for example, is like kind of fine, because in theory the card is not that much worse. Then again, when we played Goat format in Master Duel, like it did matter sometimes. But the thing is, like, you're right, Herman, like Ring of Destruction, when it came back with this effect, actually was still a good card and people were able to play it. So this kind of errata that just slightly changed the card but made it fine for a while. Nowadays no one plays it, but back in the day people did. Like, it was fine.
And on top of all of that, you took the burn damage first to ensure no tied games, placing so many new restrictions on the card that it was almost not worth it anymore. Lastly, and most importantly for the short term, Crush Card Virus lost its 3-turn effect, blocked the opponent from taking damage for the rest of the turn, and let them destroy up to 3 monsters that met the condition from their deck. While this was considerably worse than the original version by a country mile, this would actually be theoretically good for certain decks in certain metagames, but we'd have to see how it plays out the following ban list. YCS Prague would be held 2 weeks later on March 1st, and once again, Nekroz would show its dominance on the top cut, but this time would not take the event overall. Valen's Latoutre would hold that honor, taking the event with Burning Abyss.
Yeah, this is like the BA I'm talking about. This one doesn't actually play that many floodgates. It side decks one mistake, and it plays Emptiness because Emptiness is busted, but it's like just a lot of traps, discard traps. I think the reason why he won is probably because people I think this deck is good. I don't think Nekroz should often lose to this. But I think because Nekroz was super new, this was the first major event in Europe with Nekroz. I don't think people played well against this. Probably. And he probably played it well. I mean, he built this deck with the idea of beating Nekroz. So he probably did the whole have one card in hand, opponent summons Trishula, you chain like Wingwind Blast, and then the Trishula doesn't resolve. That sort of thing. He probably did that a lot throughout the tournament. So, I think he was just very well prepared to beat Nekroz, whereas Nekroz was not well prepared to beat this deck, which I think is why it was able to win. Yeah. Doesn't Nekroz play really bad? Not really. No, not really. Like the only one that plays badly into the discard traps is Trishula. But the thing is, Trishula is really good against BA, but you're not forced to make Trishula. Like, you can play, the thing is, Nekroz, the way you play it in the Nekroz mirror, you can play it a lot differently against a deck like this, where you can, like, just summon a Brionac, and that's really good against BA, because, like, they end on, like, 2 Dantes, and you just bounce them back into the extra deck, and they lose the add-backs and all that. Like, Nekroz outgrinds this deck, unless there's a Dark Law.
Yes, sporting 3 main deck.
Also, Nekroz makes Dweller, so...
copies of Mask Change 2 to access Darklaw in a metagame where his presence was becoming more and more useful by the day. As a one-sided macro,
but yes, Mask Change into Darklaw is a monster against Nekroz.
And Search Banisher was shockingly competent into Nekroz. YCS Guatemala would be a week later, though unfortunately we'd know next to nothing about this particular event outside of Eric Priego taking the event after Top Cut sealed draft. But another notable event in the game's history would be the same weekend. The ARG Circuit Series Fort Lauderdale would be held the same weekend as Guatemala, and though we haven't discussed ARG's tournaments up until this point, this particular event is extremely important to both the history of the game itself and the community at large due to a specific choice made by a top player. For those unaware, ARG, or Alter Reality Games, was a shop at the time that would regularly hold their own major tournaments completely separate from Konami's oversight. As such, these tournaments are an interesting topic for covering at another time, but this particular event would have Patrick Hoban, a major player of the era, running both Jhin in the main deck and a Jhin in the sideboard of his Nekroz deck. Because of the belief that Jhin sucked the skill out of the match, a common practice at the time was to, after game 1, ask the opponent if they would like to gentleman's out a Jhin in the main, with both players agreeing to move Jhin to the side decks for games 2 and 3. Hoban developed an angle shoot.
Okay, so just in case that wasn't worded clear enough, what people would do a lot at the time was everyone main decked one Jhin, right? And because of what I explained previously, the outs to the Jhin lock weren't actually good cards in the Nekroz mirror match. It was really annoying. So what people did was they asked their opponent, hey, do we want to side out the Jhin, right? Which at the time, I think that was completely legal. I think they changed those rules eventually. Like nowadays, I don't think you can do that anymore. At the time, it was something that people did. And what they would do is, because everyone knew that it was a one of, they would just show each other the one copy that they sided it out, right? Normally you side your cards face down and they don't see what you side in and out. But with the Jhin, they would place it face up to show the opponent that that they sided out the Jhin, right? And so what Patrick Hoban, you didn't show your opponent the cards you sided in, obviously. You just showed them, hey, I'm siding out my Jhin, right? And so, yeah, this guy just thought it'd be a great idea to just put a Jhin from the side deck into the main deck then, because obviously if both players side out the Jin, you also take out the Jin outs. Like, yes, I'm taking out Book of Eclipse if my opponent is showing me that they side out the Jin, right? And so, like, after siding, Nekroz, like I said, in the mirror match, even if the opponent goes first, they're ending on an open board. They have no more outs to Jin in their deck, so you just make the second Jin. Yeah, so at the time, think of it what you will. This was, it was, whether you think it's ethical or not, I personally think it's cringe as hell, but it was, I think, legal at the time. But the thing is, it ruined the format even further, because then people wouldn't even be able to agree on it anymore. Like, people were so scared that this was gonna happen that it basically stopped. I remember they even made, I think they made an announcement at the European Championship in 2015. Before the event started, they said, they told us to not do that, right? Because of that, right? I think it's funny as heck. I mean, from today's perspective, maybe at that point in time, I mean, I can definitely see the comical aspects of it, but it's pretty cringe. It's pretty cringe.
That he used for this specific event, gentleman'ing out of Jin in the main to bring in a second copy from his side deck to effectively trick the opponent into playing a suboptimal deck. When this news broke on the specific usage, the debate was immediately sparked on whether or not this action was both legal and ethical. While technically legal, as Konami would update their rules document in 2019 to specifically bar this kind of action from ever happening again, the ethics of it were highly suspect, to the point where Hoban ended up writing an entire article on the issue for ARG's website, which has since been archived. I will include a link to the article in the description below and let you draw your own conclusions on the.
I mean, whatever it is, I don't think it's cheating. I don't think it classifies as cheating, because it was, from what I remember, I don't know every single policy update and the policy by heart, but I'm pretty sure it was legal at the time, so it's not cheating. But it's still very questionable. I feel like it's just unsportsmanlike. I feel like, oh yeah.
Incident itself, but it would be doing a disservice to the history of the game to at least not mention it. Regardless on the ethics, this would be the biggest case of the gentleman's out.
It had a big impact on the game regarding it was legal. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was legal. People also did the same thing during Dragon Ruler format, for example, with 6 cents and return. It was a completely normal thing. Funnily enough, during Dragon Ruler, something like this couldn't have happened because both of those cards were limited, so there was no chance of another copy coming into the main deck from the side deck. The only reason why that was possible is because Jin was at 3 but played at 1.
Trend that had been present for years, with the first real case being Return from the Different Dimension and 6 Cents and Dragon Rulers. And with the next ban list, it wouldn't be the last case of gentlemen's agreements rearing its head in Yu-Gi-Oh! The new ban list would take effect on April 1st. And
how is it the next sentence? How is it the next sentence?
Would bring a massive wave of changes to the meta at large. Newly banned were the 4 Dragon Rulers, nipping any chance of Dark Matter making an impact in the bud, and Snatch Steal, in one of the funniest oops we messed up moments in the history of the ban list. Newly limited were Tour Guide as a hit to BA, preparation
of at this point, Snatch Steal could have stayed. I think. I actually think in hindsight that it wasn't that much of an oopsie. I think Snatch Steal could have stayed.
As a hit to Nekroz, Sacrifice and Skill Drain as hits to Cliffort, Symbol of Heritage as a hit to an FTK that could pop up with an unlimit later, Vanities as a hit to the staple Floodgate, Dragon Ravine, returning from the banning of the Rulers, and Sinister Serpent, Temple of the Kings, Crush Card Virus, Exchange of Spirits, and Ring of Destruction all following their erratas. Newly semi-limited were Nekroz Bryonic as a hit to Nekroz, Cliffort Scout as a hit to Klee, and Shien, Charge of the Light Brigade, and Sacred Sword of 7 stars, all up from 1. Lastly, newly unlimited were Firefist Spirit, the Baby Rulers, Bestiari, Gores, Yugioh, Fire, and Heretic Seal of Convocation, being a mass cleanup wave.
Did Yugioh have the errata at this point already?
Needless to say, this ban list moved a lot of cards up and off the list, but didn't make too many moves that would impact the actual meta. Nekroz effectively lost 3 copies of Bryonic between its hit and the prep hit, but it was still without question the most powerful.
So they brought it back to 3 in 2015. Let me hold up. They brought it back to 3 in 2015. And during Nekroz format, Nekroz, Klee, and all that, no one played it. And then a year later or something, they errata it to be even worse? That has to be the worst errata story in the history of the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. That has to be the worst one. That's insane.
Powerful deck in the game. The Klee hit was far more potent, as losing 2 copies of Sacrifice heavily hampered the deck's Nekroz matchup. Lastly, the hit towards Burning Abyss's 1-card combo of Tour Guide was impactful, but not detrimental to the deck that is entirely made of extenders. In addition to the ban list, a new Shonen Jump promo would drop in Ultimaya Zulkin, who can be summoned by sending 2 high-level monsters with the same level, a tuner and a non-tuner, to grave, and cheats out level 7 or 8 Dragon Synchros when you set a card, and can't be attacked or targeted while there's another Synchro on the board. While interesting on paper, Zulkin's main issue at this stage was a lack of good targets to summon, as the only decent targets were Synchros from the 5Ds era, causing it to not see play for now, but that could easily change with a better target. YCS Chicago would be held 2 weeks later, and to no one's surprise, Nekroz remained the top deck, seeing over half of the top cut and being the deck the winner, Stefan De Lara, piloted into the top 16 draft. The slap on the wrist that they received on the previous ban list had done jack all to the deck's insane consistency, and the Jin lock still being present was a headache for most to deal with. Shadal and Tellarknight would both see a surprising resurgence, however, with unfortunately no public list for Tellarknights being available to analyze here. Shadal, on the other hand, had received a boon on the previous ban list in the form of Crush Card Virus, as both it
triple mistake Shadal lists, man.
and Burning Abyss could use the new tool in the current metagame in a
the Trishula mirror is really funny. This is like Mirror of the Ice Barrier is like, if you get trished, you trish your opponent back really hard. I think it's like, if your opponent banishes your stuff, you can do the same, but like double to them. It's it's like reverse double trish, but only, that's the thing, right? Only if they don't hit it. You have to like set a bunch, and they have to miss the this thing, because it's like you can activate it after they banish your stuff. So it's like, it's pretty risky, right? Oh no, you chain it? Oh, okay. Mirror of the Ice Barrier. Ah, it's during this turn. Okay, I see. Yeah, okay. I misremembered. Okay, my bad.
surprisingly effective manner. As Nekroz was the dominant deck of the format, Crush Card actually did a shocking number on the strategy, able to rip most of their rituals out of hand and giving no real way to benefit from the deck destruction downside added on, allowing Shadal and Burning Abyss to both keep a foot in the door for the format. Cliffort had to adapt with the banlist hit to Sacrifice, with the most common pivot being to the Trap Reculate, able to boost your Clifforts back to full on normal, while also stunning low-level normal summons and high-level special summons. Ritual Beast would see its first premier event top, showcasing its resource loop quite effectively, having an actually surprisingly good Nekroz matchup thanks to Steed's able to non-target pop a Jin lock. This would leave the format a bit too similar to before the ban list, but with some clear changes in the air, and those changes would only be pushed forward by the OCG import set that...
Wasn't it also like... I kind of remember it was really annoying to get rid of the Ritual Beast cards because they could all chain to dodge stuff. Did Nekroz of Unicorn even negate the thing? Because doesn't it just negate while it's on the field? Yeah, it only negates... Nekroz of Unicorn only negates the effect of monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck. So, like, I think what you would do, because they return as cost, right? Yeah, because you would just activate effect to search, chain effect to go back into the extra deck, then it's not back, then it's not on the field anymore, so you could still... Basically, the full Ritual Beast combo worked under Nekroz of Unicorn.
Followed 2 days later. World Superstars. Release date, April 14th, 2015. Set type, import set. Major strategies, Heroic Challengers, Star Seraph, Galaxy. Impact.
Knock you in your head with my stick, with my stick.
World Superstars would bring a handful of cards we've been missing out on in the TCG to the game. And while some were clearly too late to have their impact felt, particularly in Neberdisc, there were still a couple of import...
Star Seraphs were... I feel like Star Seraphs were hella overhyped. I like, people were trying these in everything, and it basically boiled down to, if you didn't open stick plus chair, it was pretty bad. Like, it was just awful if you didn't open specifically both together. And so I don't feel like they did anything.
It's here worth discussing. Galaxy Soldier could special summon itself by sending a light from hand to grave, then search another galaxy monster. Soldier specifically would be considered for light decks because of its ability to access Constellar Pleiades, as by summoning it, you could search another to immediately summon for the rank 5 access. This would be experimented with for the time, but the only deck that could consistently do anything with it would be Teller, which was not completely sold on its inclusion. The heroic archetype would also see its first support since the Zexal era here. Assault Halberd could special summon itself if your opponent has a monster and you don't, and pierces, searching a heroic on damage. Thousand Blades can discard a heroic to summon a heroic from deck, locking to heroics, and can summon itself from grave when you take damage. And Rongo Miniad was a warrior locked rank 4 that could be made with up to 5 materials, gaining effects for each, which in order includes battle destruction immunity, a 1500 boost, card effect immunity, summon locking, and a board nuke. While extremely impressive, Rongo had no real enablers at the time outside of specifically Teller once again, and even then the 4th material is really what mattered in its case, unable to reliably reach that going first there, causing it to see no real play, although Halberd and Blades would both see experimentation over the coming months with upcoming releases that would allow them to stick around longer in the short term. Star Seraph Scepter can search a Star Seraph on summon, and if used for an exceed of 3+ materials, can pop a card on field to draw 1. Star Seraph Sovereignty can, when a Star Seraph is summoned, special summon itself from hand and draw 1. Only
I refuse to call these Scepter and Sovereignty. To me, all to this day, they are stick and chair.
able to be used for an exceed that takes 3+ materials. Scepter and Sovereignty, or Stick and Chair as they became known in the community, were extremely interesting options for decks that wanted access to Deltros or Diamond, as opening one of each could get you there thanks to Scepter Search and Sovereignty Summon going onto a chain with each other from Scepter Summon, meaning that by searching another Sovereignty, you could trigger its summon effect off the summon of the first Sovereignty due to how hand knowledge worked, resulting in anywhere from 2 to 3 draws and 2 pops from these cards alone, which would see Splash play as an engine for the near future. Lastly for the set, Utopic Future could be made using 2 non-number exceeds of the same rank, can't be destroyed by battle, reflects damage back to the opponent, and takes control of anything it battles for the battle phase, able to protect itself from destruction by detaching material. This would be slotted into BA thanks to its ability to convert used up rank 3s into a body that does something, as well as being a Dante holder, as Dante would still trigger when detached off, similar to how Downard had been used. YCS Bogota would be held the same weekend and would be the end of an era in its own way, as this would be the final event to do sealed draft top cuts in the history of the game as of the writing of the script. From these results, though the meta had remained mostly the same, there were a couple of adaptations worth looking into. Shadal would be the primary strategy, seeing a change in its game plan, as with the rising need for more relevant lights in its lineup for access to Construct, the new Stick and Chair filled that niche optimally, giving the deck access to Evil Swarm or Ouroboros of all things to provide a hand rip going first, in addition to the draw 2 off Chair. This would become the norm for Shadals moving forward, including Stick and Chair into lists for the added
draw. By the way,
if
you're wondering about the popularity of Mind Crush at the time, this is obviously still, I think, the old Mind Crush rulings, where you would see your opponent's hand when you Mind Crush, but obviously because Nekroz searched so much, you could basically Mind Crush them at any point. But there, it was even more crucial because the most important interaction with Mind Crush was to actually chain it to a ritual spell, and the most important thing was we've seen him earlier. Shurit, the Nekroz strategist or whatever it's called, can be used as the entire ritual material for a ritual summon. So what people would do is they would set up ritual spell Shurit plus the monster that they wanted to like summon, or maybe they wanted to summon from the graveyard or whatever. What you would do is you would Mind Crush the Shurit to in response to the ritual spell, right? So they activate ritual spell, you chain Mind Crush on Shurit. They can't conduct the ritual summon, or even worse for them, they might be forced to make a ritual summon that they didn't want to make, because like, let's say I have like a Valkyris in my hand that I can still summon, you know, unless Mirror was used. That's, yeah, but if you activate Cycle or Kaleidoscope and you were going to tribute the Shurit, then you can't do that. Only Mirror can banish the Shurit from the graveyard. That's the only one, right? And then again, there were ways to play around it with Nekroz, because if you didn't have Manju or Senju, like you didn't have a normal summon, something that you could do is you could set Shurit, or something you could also very often do is you would act like you had Shurit in hand, right? You would, like, I don't know. Your plan was to activate Cycle. You wouldn't even plan on using Shurit, right? But because you activated Cycle, your opponent thought you had Shurit in hand, so they would Mind Crush the Shurit and you didn't have it. Or the simplest method to play around it was to get to use Nekroz Mirror, which Nekroz Mirror could banish the cost from the graveyard. So if they chain Mind Crush on Shurit, it gets discarded, but you can still banish it from the graveyard, right? And then the third thing to outplay Mind Crush as a Nekroz player was because if you went for Kaleidoscope, the most common thing that people would do with Kaleidoscope is to activate Kaleidoscope and then send Herald of the Arclight from the extra deck to the graveyard to summon Nekroz of Unicorn, right? So what you could do, let's say your hand is Valkyrus and Shurit, and you have Nekroz of Clausulus in your hand, right? You can go Nekroz of Clausulus for Kaleidoscope, and then you could activate Kaleidoscope. And your opponent would think, well, they go for a Kaleidoscope, so they might have a Unicorn in hand, so I'm going to Mind Crush the Unicorn. But your plan from the beginning was to go Kaleidoscope, Tribute Shurit. You were not even gonna send the cost from the extra deck, because you don't have to. You can still Tribute Shurit. So they would Mind Crush Unicorn thinking you had it, because you went for Kaleidoscope, but you didn't have it. So, you know, there's a lot of cool interaction with Mind Crush.
And the 3-mat rank 4 access. Barrett Keys would take the event, piloting to top 16 with Nekroz, who did not make his list public. YCS Bochum would be held 2 weeks later, and with the discovery of Stick and Chair for the deck, Shadal rose quite substantially in representation, but would not be the most interesting happenings of this particular event. Mecha Phantom Beast had cleared its way into top cut for the first time ever as its own deck, utilizing the newly released Yakuzalon from World Superstars to rip an opponent's hand apart on the first turn, able to make it so far primarily off the surprise factor of it. Volcanic Hero would also be a new take on the rogue level strategy, utilizing Summoner Monk to access Shadow Mist with the Dark Wall lines while also utilizing the standard Volcanic package that had carried the strategy into the fringes of the meta. Lucas Shatoni would take the event on Nekroz, notably playing a copy of DD Warrior Lady in the main as an option to remove the Jin block that was searchable with a semi-limited Rhoda. This would lead into the next core set, and though Secrets before it was not too impactful on the meta at large, this one would introduce a series of monsters that would change the perception of the game forever with the right amount of time. Crossed Souls. Release date, May 15th, 2015. Set type, core set. Major strategies, Frightfur, Zephyra, Infernoid. Impact, a ghost girl that would shape the future. Crossed Souls was the second core set of the year, and as far as core sets goes, while not ushering in a new era of the game, it did bring a couple of pieces that would shape a couple of movements in the meta over the coming years. Starting with the new archetype, Zephyra is a series of pendulum monsters that take a bunch of the dual terminal lore archetypes of recent releases and give them a couple of new support pieces tied to the idea of a centralized archetype. In reality, this archetype would do next to nothing as Zephyra's, but would give a couple of their tie-in archetypes new tools to tinker with. Yang Xing would see Zephyraxi, who makes a Yang Xing a tuner when summoned from the deck and goes to the bottom of deck when it leaves field, and Zephyr Nui, who searches a Yang Xing spell trap when summoned from deck. These two would do a number of things for Yang Xing by giving them more varied synchro access as well as, and far more importantly, the ability to search for creation and path, boosting the deck's consistency considerably to where Yang Xing could be considered on the fringes of Rogue now, but still not properly meta. Ritual Beast would get Zephyr Ampilica, who summons a RB from grave on normal, popping it in the end phase, and Zephyr Wendy, who adds a Zephyr from face-up extra deck to hand on normal.
There was also a Nekroz Pendulum monster,
Obviously,
right?
one of these was way better than the other here, with Zephyr Ampilica seeing play in RB moving forward as a mid to late game push. Lastly, Oracle of Zephyra searches a Zephyra on activation and gives effects when you summon a Zephyra or a monster using Zephyrs as material from the extra deck or ritual summons. This would mostly be disregarded as Zephyra wasn't the best archetype, but an interesting condition of the card is that if you cannot perform the search, you cannot activate it, which while irrelevant now, would see an interesting application in a few years. Fluffle would get some of its first decent support in Edgeup Chain, who searches a Frightfur card on being sent to grave and searches another chain when it attacks. Frightfur Sheep, who takes Chain and a Fluffle, stuns effects when attacking, and reborns itself on destruction, boosting by 800, and Frightfur Fusion, a miracle fusion for Frightfurs. While still not close to meta, Fluffle support was finally heading in the right direction, which would see some experimentation later this year with more releases. Infernoid would see 3 new monsters in Pyrmaze, who spins back a card without letting that card respond once per turn.
Zephyr Saber, whose only purpose was to counter anti-spell. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think there was a Nekroz Pendulum monster that could also perform a ritual summon. And I remember playing that. I think I played it at German Nationals 2015 because it would be able to summon a ritual monster under anti-spell or under Secret Village. Because you could search it with Brionac, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. You could search it with Brionac and then make a ritual summon happen, even if your opponent had anti-spell or Secret Village. Literally, Nekroz was by far the most powerful deck. But like the main side quest, like basically Nekroz, you're focused on the mirror match, but your side quest is to make sure that you don't lose to random floodgates that all of the other decks were playing. Like you had to run like back row removal, and then you had to run some creative ways to out all kinds of different floodgates, because that was the only lose condition. Unironically, it was the only lose condition versus most other decks in the format, because Nekroz was so powerful. You just have to make sure you don't get anti-spelled, because on the other side, like, people got really creative in how to floodgate Nekroz, right? Like in the beginning, it was only like mistake and emptiness, but then eventually it got a lot more.
Zed, who makes an opponent bans a monster from their extra deck on attack deck, and Deviati, who nukes all spells and traps on summon except void cards and contribute a monster to negate and banish a monster using its effect. Deviati was obviously the most talked about piece here, having a similar impact to Onunku without the downside of removing her tribute fodder with her nuke effect, which in turn would cause Infernoid's playability to shoot up. Burning Abyss would see new pieces in Draghig, who stacks a BA card from deck, and Barbar, who can banish up to 3 BAs engraved to burn for 300 for each. Draghig and Barbar would both see their niches in the current version of BA, with Barbar in particular filling a gap in the deck's ability to close out games over time. UA would see decent support this round with Signing Deal, able to cheat out a UA from deck by burning the user for its level times 300, and negates its effects and locks it from being synchro or exceed material, and Penalty Box, making UAs able to temporarily banish anything they attack and can be banished from grave to search a UA spell. These two would both be solid for the strategy, with Signing Deal being a starter the deck desperately needed, and Penalty Box giving the deck spell searching, but without a way to reliably get it engraved, UA would continue to see zero play in the meta. Onto the one-offs. Lizard Draw would be another option for the theoretical Pendulum pile, able to send itself from scale to extra and have another performer pile and scale to draw 1, which with its high scale and typing made it a consideration. Annoyantillis would be the Water Shadal fusion, blocking special summons from hand or grave using spell traps, which couldn't be more targeted.
This card was just basically anti-Nekroz. This was the one reason why Shadal comes back into the Nekroz format, because Annoyantillis does exactly what the name suggests. It's really annoying for Nekroz.
At Nekroz if it actively tried to be, giving Shadal an in-archetype counter. Ulti Gaia was a new RB contact fusion taking a Spiritual Beast, a Tamer, and an RB fusion, able to banish an RB in hand to negate anything that activates. This was undoubtedly a formidable end boss, but the lack of a tag-out effect and requiring a significant amount of resource burning to pull off left it in a weird space.
Winda is not a problem for Nekroz at all, because you can out Winda with one special summon easy, but you couldn't beat Annoyantillis.
Would see play. Tellarknight Ptolemaeus takes 2 or more level 4s, can detach 3 to rank up into a light rank 5, and can detach 7 to skip the opponent's next turn, able to attach a Stellar Knight from extra deck to it in the end phase. Those last 2 effects I don't think anyone has ever actually read, as Ptolemaeus had 2 uses from the word go, either to be used to rank up into Pallades using 3 materials, or to access Diamond in any strategy using just 2. As such, it would see play immediately and hold its niches for a certain matchup, but would become far more of a headache within the next year for other reasons. Galaxy Cyclone pops a set spell trap on activation and can be banished from grave to pop a face-up 1, being a double up on spell trap removals at the cost of being more difficult to use, which would see some experimentation. Unexpected Die special summons a normal level 4 or lower from your deck if you control no monsters, being talked about for synchro and exceed toolboxes, but being discarded almost immediately as there was no real benefit to running it and a regular vanilla in your deck. Lose 1 turn negates monster effects the turn they're special summon and swaps them to defense mode on summon, being so clearly targeted towards using Cleese that it was almost laughable, seeing play immediately. Moon Mirror Shield makes its equipped monster boost to the attack value of whatever it battles plus 100, cycling itself to top or bottom of deck on destruction for 500 life points. This was a stun player's dream, as it made the most problematic but weak monsters in the game impossible to outward battle, seeing play for that reason alone, but not being as powerful as you might remember in the meta at large due to various answers to it existing in the format, as well as it potentially locking its user out of the game if its recursion is used incorrectly. Melody of Awakening Dragon, for the cost of a discard, searches 2 dragons with 3000 or more attack and 2500 or less defense, which reads as Blue Eyes pretty much any way you slice it, which while not useful now would see considerable play in the coming year. Galaxy Eyes Full Armor Photon Dragon takes 3 level 8s or another Galaxy Eyes Exceed, can suck up equips as materials, and can attach 1 to pop a face-up card once per turn, seeing play as a tool for rank 8 strategies. Lastly, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit could be discarded to pop any card that uses an effect after it's already face-up, specifically being useful in countering out continuous cards and field spells. While it seemed decent and fairly unassuming on the surface, Ghost Ogre would be the start of a new era in hand traps, which would, over the following years, explode in their utility as more and more Ghost Girls join the fray. YCS Columbus would be the testing grounds for these new tools, as well as the 150th YCS, held a week after Cross Souls released, and no changes have been seen in the meta at large outside of BA including its new monsters and rank 4 accessible decks using Ptolemaeus. Terrence Kinsley would take the event on Nekroz, notably playing a copy of Bullblader and copies of Book of Eclipse as a way to answer the Jin lock, which would become an option.
This I remember talking to him. I'm pretty sure this is the exact same list that Alpi and myself played the finals of German Nationals with. I'm pretty sure we gave him our list, and it's the exact same one, and he went completely undefeated. It was a pretty good list.
Many players would use moving forward. This would also mark the beginning of the WCQ season, with the Oceania WCQ being held 2 weeks later, and similar to Columbus, the format held unchanged. Oliver Parle would take the event on Nekroz, similarly.
I wonder if that was the only time German Nationals finals was a complete mirror match, like card for card.
playing lockouts in Warrior Lady and Eclipse. The Central America WCQ would be 2 weeks later, and though the meta was still fairly consistent to what we had seen up until this point, a new face would crack into top 32 here. Infernoid would finally see a premier event top, utilizing a small Lightsworn engine to facilitate both early mills and to set up Infernoid summons, as well as to access utility like Lila's spell trap popping and Aaron's ability to out anything flipped by Book of Eclipse. Galileo Souza would take the event on Nekroz, being mostly standard, but notably including 3 copies of Solemn Scolding in the back row.
Yeah, this is where people started getting a little crazy with the Jin lock, like playing Scolding to protect it. I remember this time period. This was very popular during the European Championships.
Thanks to Nekroz's next to no trap lineup, allowing the utility. The North American WCQ was next, held a week later, and once again, it's the same story as usual, with the only outlier being a single hero list that squeaked into top 64, utilizing the newly released Assault Halberd as a rank 4 extension piece, as well as Goblin Berg to special summon Shadow Mist for the search. Noah Green would take the event on Burning Abyss, utilizing both the newly...
By the way, rule of thumb, I've never seen a format in Yu-Gi-Oh's history where Mind Crush is being main decked. That was bad. Whenever Mind Crush is being main decked, the format is good. There's no, you cannot convince me otherwise. Mind Crush in the main deck equals good format.
Released Crush Card Virus Errata, as well as cards like Karma Cut, Phoenix Wing, and Raigeki Break to trigger BA effects on the opponent's turn. As we cross into July for the year, a new Shonen Jump promo would begin its distribution, being Frightfur Tiger, a fusion of sabers and at least one Fluffle monster, able to pop cards on field on summon up to the materials used.
I mean, it's because the other format that I'm thinking of is 2018 Sky Striker format, where I Trickstar Sky Striker and Sky Striker format until it eventually got ruined by Goki. But in that format, I main decked Mind Crush at German Nationals as well. And the reason why I think it was a good format, or why Mind Crush in the main deck makes it a good format, is because Mind Crush is inherently a relatively slow card with that plays a lot with information and does nothing to the board state, right? So a format where you can afford to play a card like that, where like knowledge about the hand matters and the long game matters, and like Mind Crush literally, for example, in the Sky Striker format was good enough to main deck because going second, it was still really good. Because, for example, the Sky Striker mirror match with Shizuku for Engage. So you could Mind Crush that Engage, and that was really important. Or the Trickstar matchup would summon a Candina, and then add that Candina back to the hand with Licorice. And so you could Mind Crush their follow-up. And it was a really important interaction in this format, whereas it was like, and just the idea of, I'm going second, my opponent plays, because there wasn't that many hand traps, and I can just do my stuff and then set a Mind Crush, and that, out of all things, is actually a good card to have in that situation. That just has to be a healthy format. Because think of it right now. Think of it from today's perspective. Like, your opponent goes Snake Eye combo and you set a Mind Crush. Like, compare those situations, right? And you know what I mean. Right? You understand how different the dynamic of the format needs to be for you to be able to play Mind Crush when you're going second, for example, right? The ruling change for Mind Crush is not that important in my opinion. Like, it matters a little bit, but I don't think that's the reason why we don't play Mind Crush as much anymore. I think the reason why we don't play Mind Crush as much anymore is because the dynamic in the game has changed by so much, right? Because we simply are not in a format anymore where you do that. It's definitely the reason why. It is definitely not the reason why. Mind Crush would be in no decks right now with the new ruling, with the old ruling. Like, you wouldn't play Mind Crush. It's simply, the game is too fast, and the fact that it does not, yeah. I will very much disagree. I mean, that's fine. It's nothing wrong with disagreeing, but I don't think you would play Mind Crush anywhere right now.
Boosting Fright First by 300 for each Fluffle or Frightfur you control.
There's no way out of all the trap cards that we have in the game, you would ever like to have Mind Crush the most in the current dynamic of the game. There's just no way.
able to be one on field at a time. This was absolutely the best fusion they had received so far, giving Fluffles an actual boss monster worth summoning that took the same materials as Wolf, meaning that you could set up for an OTK using the two in combination, seeing experimentation at a rogue level with this release. After that detour, the European WCQ was a week after NA, and once again, no real surprises, seeing a similar spread to the NA WCQ. Edo Marcus would take the event on Shadal, being the strongest performance the deck had had the entire year, utilizing the monster Pero Cerberus to access Shekinaga and give removal afterwards, also dumpable with Mathematician. Lastly, for the WCQ season, the South American WCQ would be held the same day, and, stop me if you've heard this one before, we'd see the same spread of decks in the top cut, with Gerardo de Galdo taking the event on Nekroz utilizing the Bullblader option as well as the Solemn Scolding package. With the WCQ season done and in the books, a new ban list would take effect on July 16th, and this would actually mark a significant change in how the ban list was updated, as now it would no longer be standardly the first of the month like it had almost always had been before. This meant that the ban lists now had a little more unpredictability to them, which would only grow in the coming years. Newly banned were Jin Releaser of Rituals and Laval Chain, putting an official end to the Jin lock, which by this point players were absolutely sick of. Newly limited were Shurit, being one of the best options for Nekroz thanks to its search, and Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, returning from the banned section. Newly semi-limited were Atlantean Dracoons and Dragon Ravine, both returning from 1, and newly unlimited were Darkstrike Fighter, Glow Up Bulb, Sinister Serpent, Sacred Sword of 7 Stars, Temple of the Kings, and Exchange of the Spirit, finishing up the previous list's cleanup wave. With the only hits being targeted at exclusively Nekroz, Konami was making it clear that they knew the issues with the deck prior to the WCQ season and were now taking steps to correct it, which would bring the deck more in line with other strategies of the era, but by no means take it out of Tier 1 contention.
I mean, I think this is where peak Nekroz format begins, right? Because a couple of things change here. Notably, the whole Jin lock is gone, but there's a lot of other things, like the fact that Shurit got limited, I actually think does a lot of good things for the Nekroz mirror match, because the resource management with Shurit is like really important. Like being able to, like, you have to decide, when do I banish it? When do I banish my Jin from the graveyard with mirror? Because then it's gone. It's not gone forever. We'll talk about that in a moment, but like, it's gone for a while. It's not that easy to get it back from banished as it is to get it back from the graveyard, because from graveyard you can just get it back with Unicorn, add it back to hand, and then use it. But the decision on when to get rid of your one Shurit to banish it, because you had to go through some extra steps to add it back from banish, was pretty huge.
This would lead into the next set releasing the next day.
This is Time Wizard material. I would agree. I would tend to agree. This, if I was to replay any Nekroz format, it would be this upcoming one. This is peak Nekroz gameplay, I think.
Meta staples to the game. Many expected something similar to happen this time, but
Hey, what is this set?
Dragons of Legend 2. Release date, July 17th, 2015. Set type, import set. Major strategies, Critias and Hermos. Tune, Prediction Princess.
Oh, nothing
Impact.
happened. Okay. Yeah, nothing. Okay.
Dragons of Legend 2 had massive shoes to fill, as the last set brought the Hands and Soul Charge, which fundamentally changed the meta. So what did this edition bring? Unfortunately, this edition brought nothing of actual relevance to the game, including a new block of support for Red Eyes, as well as new strategies in Critias, Hermos, and Aqua Actress, all of which did jack in the meta. Only two strategies here were worth talking about, and that would be Prediction Princess and Tunes. So let's start with Prediction Princess.
Worth talking about is the biggest stretch I've ever heard.
Terra Tri would be their boss monster, a ritual that could special summon a flip monster from grave in your end phase face down and can flip a monster up or down on a quick effect once per turn. This would be considered interesting, but overall lacked anything worth flipping for the time being relegated to the bulk pile for now. Tune would be the strategy that brought in the most attention, namely thanks to its new field spell, Tune Kingdom, which effectively was Tune World with targeting protection and battle destruction prevention for your tunes, giving the strategy more actual sticking power.
Yeah, I agree. This has to be, I didn't even remember this set. This has to be one of the worst sets ever. In like, measuring just meta impact.
Outside of the common threat of an MST to the book. They also received Comic Hand, being an in-strategy version of Snatch Steal, making its target a tune and able to attack directly, and Mimicat, able to steal anything from the opponent's grave to use for yourself. While interesting for sure, Tune still saw no relevant play from this due to still having the same problem of the entire deck dying to a copy of MST, which Kingdom did not solve. This left the game with no real shakeup, leaving any new developments to the next core set releasing a month later.
Oh, that does shake up.
Clash of Rebellions. Release date, August 7th, 2015. Set type, core set. Major strategies, Perform Age, Ignite, Cosmo. Impact, the core set to end all core sets. I'm probably going to get a bit of flack on this one, but I truly do believe that Core should be regarded as one of the greatest core sets of all time. This singular set would introduce new engines, power cards, and archetypes that would completely define the course of the next year of Yu-Gi-Oh! And sadly, I believe it gets lost in the shuffle a little bit due to it coming between Duelist Alliance, which is regularly referred to as the set that completely changed Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is valid, and a set in early 2017 that once again changed the game forever, which we'll get to. Regardless, this is one of those sets that introduced so much that would shape the game as we know it that we're going to need to speedrun through the less notable stuff first so that we can give those parts the time that they deserve. Let's start with Red Eyes, getting a complimentary wave of support that syncs up with their Dragons of Legend of 2 wave from the last month by having next to nothing in common with it. Yay. Black Flare Dragon is a Gemini that burns the opponent for its attack at the end of the battle phase it battles. Black Stone of Legend contributes itself to summon a level 7 or lower Red Eyes from deck and can recur itself from grave to hand by shuffling back a Red Eyes in grave. Black Metal Dragon equips itself from hand onto a Red Eyes and boosts it by 600 and searches a Red Eyes when sent from field to grave. Archfiend of Lightning is a Gemini that can nuke anything with a defense lower than its attack. Archfiend Black Skull Dragon is a fusion of an Archfiend and a Red Eyes normal that stuns effects while attacking and burns at the end of the battle phase it attacks for the attack of a Red Eyes in grave, shuffling it back into deck. Flare Metal is a rank 7 that has an effect destruction immunity, burns the opponent for 500 for using any card or effect, and can attach to revive a normal Red Eyes. Cards of the Redstone pitches a Red Eyes from hand to draw 2 and dump 1 from deck to grave, and Red Eyes Fusion lets you fusion summon a monster that uses Red Eyes as material using monsters in deck, but locks you out of other normal and special summons that turn. Long and short, Red Eyes as an archetype did nothing of note, but Flare Metal would see play as a generic 7 burn option, and Fusion would be the first of 3 spells in the set that could fuse using materials in the deck, with all 3 of these finding meta relevance at one point in the game's history due to that effect being universally considered one of the best fusion effects possible, though Red Eyes Fusion's relevance wouldn't be for a handful of years. Ignite was a series of normal pendulum monsters that all share the effect to pop both scaled Ignites to search a Fire Warrior monster from deck or grave, with 2 level 3s in Squire and Crusader, 2 level 4s in Templar and Paladin, a level 5 in Margrave, and a level 6 in Gallant, as well as a field spell in Ignition Phoenix, which boosts all Ignites by 300 and lets you pop an Ignite card to search an Ignite card once per turn. Ignite had some real applications in the rogue space thanks to being able to effectively pop your monsters to search scales, then set scales and bring them all back for Exceed material. But this came with the downside of once you make an Exceed with them, they're mostly gone for good by ending up in the grave, which led to it being mostly unpopular. However, there was one other piece that was tangentially related that would iron out that obvious flaw. Luster Pendulum the Draco Slayer was a scale 5 level 4 tuner that could only be used for the summon of a Draco Slayer monster and could pop your other scale to search another copy of that card once per turn while in the scale. This enabled Ignites to access Ignister Prominence, a level 8 pendulum locked synchro that could summon a Draco Slayer from deck once per turn and pop a pendulum monster or scale you control to spin another card on field back to deck without targeting. Ignister Prominence and Luster Pendulum would over the coming months take their positions as the poster boys for what became known.
It's funny how we're going from, I just now realizing that, how we're going from one of the best formats of all time, which is going to be Clash of Rebellion Nekroz format, into, like, we're getting Breakers of Shadows soon, right? Which is one of the most troll despair formats at the time.
As the Pendulum Pile deck, which at this stage was starting to take form but wouldn't become an actual presence in the meta until the next core set. Infernoid would see its 3rd wave of support here in Decatron, who was the first normal summonable Infernoid, able to
Bosch is the first of 2016, okay. I misremembered.
Dump an Infernoid on summon to gain its level, name, and effects. Tierra, a fusion of a Nunku, Deviati, and any number of other Infernoids that gains effects for the number used to fuse her, ripping both players extra decks for 3, milling both players 3 for 5, returning 3 banished cards for each player to deck for 8, and ripping both players' hand apart completely for 10. And Void Imagination, a continuous spell that makes all Infernoids level 1, cuts Infernoid battle damage in half, and, if the opponent controls an extra deck summoned monster, lets you fusion summon an Infernoid using up to 6 materials from deck in addition to hand and field by sending itself to grave. Put bluntly, this support was incredible for Infernoid, giving them a monster that could actually be summoned proactively without setup and a way to get multiple monsters on the board with a Nunku, plugging the deck's primary flaw. Tierra and the fusion effect of Imagination were usually just seen as a way to set up the grave for Infernoid pushes, not necessarily for the actual benefit of the fusion summon, but they would see play as well. The Perform Mages would see their introduction here, a series of spellcasters aimed at manipulating life points by their effects to generate advantage. Damage Juggler can be discarded to negate and destroy a card that deals effect damage, can be discarded to block the next battle damage you take that turn, and can be banished from grave to search for a Perform Mage. Hat Tricker can special summon itself if there are 2 or more monsters on the field, can gain a Perform Mage counter to block effect damage dealt to yourself, and its attack and defense become 3300 when it reaches 3 counters. Trick Clown can summon a Perform Mage from grave when sent to grave, setting its attack and defense to 0 and burning the user for 1000, and Trapeze Magician is a spellcaster locked rank 4 that blocks all damage less than its attack, can detach to make a monster able to attack twice that turn but it blows up in the end of the battle phase, and if destroyed special summons a Perform Mage from deck. While unassuming on the surface, Perform Mages would become an engine that would shape the next year of the game, as the advantage you generate solely off of Trick Clown would be enough to consider them useful, but add in the damage blocking and searching of Damage Juggler and the easy summon ability of Hat Tricker led the engine to see substantial play, especially near the end of the year with another discovery from this same set. We also received 2 new TCG exclusive archetypes to take the reins from BA and UA, which would be present for the next 4 core sets. The first of these was Cosmo, a series of low-level psychics and high-level machines loosely based on a combination of the Wizard of Oz and Star Wars, with the psychics all sharing an effect to banish themselves to summon a higher level Cosmo on a quick effect, and the machines all sharing an effect to banish themselves from grave on destruction to special summon a lower level Cosmo from deck. Farm Girl could pay 500 upon dealing battle damage to search a Cosmo card, Good Witch could pay 500 to flip a monster face down, Slip Rider pops a spell trap on summon, and Forerunner has targeting protection and gives its controller 1000 life points back in their standby phase. Lastly, Cosmo Town was their field spell, able to add a banished Cosmo to hand by paying life for its level times 100, can shuffle any number of Cosmo monsters in hand to deck that draw that many, and if destroyed by card effect, searches a Cosmo card. While not as explosive out the gate as Burning Abyss had been, Cosmo was clearly going to be a powerhouse in future metas with this initial wave of support, bringing Emergency Teleport back to the forefront of player consciousness thanks to Farm Girl being a valid summon target with it, and Forerunner being a super easy to summon boss monster that was actually shockingly difficult to out with its targeting protection. That targeting protection, though, would see a new way to out it through the other new TCG exclusive archetype in Kaijus, a series of high power monsters that can be summoned to your opponent's field by tributing a monster they control, and to your field if the opponent controls a Kaiju, with each having an additional effect revolving around Kaiju counters. Dogoron can remove 3 counters to nuke your opponent's monsters, Kumongus can remove 2 counters to negate the effect of a newly summoned monster and block it from attacking that turn, and Kyoto Waterfront gains counters anytime a card is sent from field to grave, capping out at 5, and can search a Kaiju once per turn if it's at 3 or more counters, able to remove a counter to prevent effect destruction. While next to no one would use the field spell or an actual Kaiju-focused deck, Kumongus would see play out the gate for being able to tribute over an opponent's monster without eating your normal summon that turn, giving players an option to out towers like bosses, specifically using Kumongus because it was the weaker of the two to give the opponent sitting at 2400 attack. Moving into the one-offs, Magical Abductor gets a counter whenever a spell is activated while on field or in scale, able to remove 3 to search a Pendulum monster while in scale or a level 1 spellcaster while on field. Archfiend Eccentric can pop itself in scale to pop another spell trap on field or tribute itself on field to pop another monster. Both of these cards would see experimentation in the aforementioned Pendulum pile, with Eccentric seeing general play as well for being effectively an MST that could also double as monster removal where needed. Retaliating Sea can special summon itself if your opponent activates a spell that can special summon a monster, banishing any card sent to grave while summoned this way, and searches an earth insect on being sent to grave. While it's clear this was meant as a counter to strategies like Nekroz and Shadal, Retaliating would also be extremely notable at the time for searching Max C when removed. Wavering Eyes pops all pen scales, then provides effects based on how many you pop, with 1 burning the opponent for 500, 2 searching for any Pendulum monster.
This card was so cringe in Pendulum Mirrors. Oh my god, dude.
3 banishing a card on field, and 4 searching another copy of Wavering Eyes. This was clearly meant as a counter to Pendulums as they became more and more powerful, but in actuality, it just acted as a way for Pendulum strategies to get an Ignite-style search off, which would become even more powerful if you matched into a Pendulum strategy yourself. Chicken Game blocked whichever player is losing from taking damage, allowing both players on their turn to pay 1000 to use one of its effects, being a draw 1, give the opponent 1000 life, or popping that card. Obviously, the primary usage of this card was a pseudo-reverse Upstart Goblin, paying 1000 life points to draw a card, but this would become one of the most degenerate FTK enablers ever, as the previously released field spell Pseudo Space could be placed over it after using the draw effect to then banish it from grave, pay 1000, and draw again. Because of this, Chicken Game FTK became a known threat in the format, being utilized with either a Magical Explosion end goal or Exodia, which was made worse by cards like Hope for Escape and Terraforming, enabling the strategy to insane.
I'm pretty sure this also topped the next European YCS. I don't know if we're gonna bring it up, but I'm pretty sure someone topped with that deck at, like, I want to say YCS Rimini or Prague or whatever that year.
Degrees. Storming Mirror Force would be the first in a new series of elemental retrains of the classic Battle Trap, bouncing all attack position monsters to hand when attacked into. While this wouldn't see play for now, it would set the trend for the next year of new Mirror Force variants coming out with wildly different conditions and effects that would each find their own homes in the game. Lastly, and probably one of the biggest sleeper hits of the set, Gem Knight would receive 2 new cards of note. Lady Brilliant Diamond is a fusion of any 3 Gem Knights that can send a Gem Knight from field to grave to summon another from extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. This enabled all sorts of FTKs with Lady Lapis Lazuli and Master Diamond, but for the time being was too inconsistent to do anything noteworthy. The far more impactful piece of this support here was Brilliant Fusion, a fusion from deck spell for Gem Knights that had no restrictions on when it could fuse, but dropped the monster it summoned to 0/0, able to discard a spell to boost that monster back to normal stats for the turn. While incredibly unassuming for the time, Brilliant Fusion would actually be one of the most powerful setup tools ever conceived for the time, as by playing a copy of Gem Knight Garnet, you could use it to send the Garnet in any light to make Seraphonite, who in turn provided an additional normal summon as well as dumping of whatever light you wanted. The go-to light of the era was undoubtedly Perform Age Trick Clown, as by dumping it with Brilliant, Trick Clown could then revive itself immediately, giving the user 2 monsters and an additional normal summon to work with off of the 1 Brilliant Fusion, which would become more and more popular in the coming months, but was not immediately discovered on release. This would also lead to the community coining the term Garnet
was a card. Yeah, see, the thing is, you guys are saying that, and I think the crazy part is I believe you guys that you did not know where the term Garnet comes from. But this is what it is. The term, when someone calls a brick a garnet, a card you don't want to draw, this is because this is where it's from. Because people were forced to play Garnet to fit Brilliant Fusion in their deck. And that's why it's called this.
You played in deck for an engine but did not want to draw, named for the Gemnite Garnet you'd play, as Brilliant Fusion had to specifically send its materials from deck to grave. The World Championship for 2015 would be held a week later on August 15th, 2015, and an extremely important note here is that the World's winner from 2014, Sahabi Karandine of Canada, would not be allowed to participate despite his World's title due to a cheating suspension that was in effect at the time, seeing his spot for the tournament filled by the runner-up of last year's Worlds, Hayama Shinsuke of Japan. Once again, due to the combined format, a number of strategies were left in an unplayable state going into Worlds. Burning Abyss was still a TCG exclusive, leaving it out of the tournament completely, while Shadal had taken many hits in the OCG with the banning of Construct and the limiting of Shadal Fusion, leaving the deck heavily suboptimal for play here. Of the publicly available top 8 lists, Hero would be a notable standout, seeing top 8, utilizing Mystic Tomato of all things in the slimmed down metagame to access Shadow Mist for Darklaw, with a suite of revival traps to make the setup even easier. Nekroz would make it all the way to second place here despite the additional hits of a limited Unicorn and a semi-limited Cycle, utilizing more of the non-ritual Nekroz line than ever before like Exa and Great Sorcerer, even going so far as to utilize the hands once again to fill out the control core of the deck.
So this was basically super neuter Nekroz because of how the World's format works, where like everything is the two banlists combined. Sometimes it results in like super low power formats. So this is like, this is not even like this Nekroz deck just makes me sad. One Brionac, one Unicorn, one Shurit is just massive hits to the deck. One Prep, one Rhoda. It plays Gold Sarcophagus. It's like, but I mean, it's World's format was wild sometimes.
Like Exa and Great Sorcerer, even going so far as to utilize the hands once again to fill out the control core of the deck. Despite how he qualified the event, Hayama Shinsuke of Japan would take this year's World Championship title using Teller Knight, the one Duelist Alliance.
This is the one setting where I would say Teller Knight may have been the best deck. There was maybe still a way to like beat it. Maybe there was a better deck. I didn't play this World Championship, so I never got super deep into the format. But I'm seeing all the hits to Nekroz, and like, I don't know, maybe this deck was better.
Strategy that had taken no substantial hits, utilizing its almost standard game plan at this stage to consistently control game.
Ritual Beast was crazy, but no one wanted to play Ritual Beast. That might be true, actually. Was there a hit to Ritual Beast already? Is Canahawk already limited at this point?
And earned this year's title of World Champion.
No?
This would lead into the next structure.
Then unironically, it may have been Ritual Beast.
Deck of the year a week later, and with the world substantially shocked by Teller's performance on the world stage, many hope for something to help bolster a new meta strategy.
Okay, what is this? Oh, the
Synchron
starter deck?
Extreme. Release date, August 28th, 2015. Set type, Structure Deck. Major strategies, Synchron. Impact, new Synchro tools, nothing else. Synchron Extreme was a structure deck of all time for sure, as while it didn't bring anything to really affect the short term, it did bring one tool that would affect the game in the long run in Jet Synchron. A level 1 tuner that searches a junk monster when sent to grave for a Synchro summon, and can revive itself by discarding a card and banishes itself when it leaves the field. Jet may have been a little bit ahead of its time, as for now it wouldn't be too useful, but a self-reviving tuner a la Gub would be greatly appreciated with the right amount of time passing. YCS Toronto would be held the same weekend, and with it there came a new format vibe in the air. It was the first testing grounds of Core, the first YCS of the new season, and with it would mark the changing over of the YCS prize card once again. And for those still reeling from the stint of Giant Hand a few years ago, it was about to get so much worse. Minerva the Exalted Lightsworn can detach 1 to mill 3, drawing cards equal to the Lightsworns milled this way, and when destroyed mills 3 to pop cards up to the number of Lightsworns milled. This card was, to put bluntly, one of the best milling tools we've seen.
This was not a great decision
since Lavalval Chain. Being a rank 4 meant that it was so generically accessible and boosted multiple strategies in the format from Shadal to Infernoid to countless rogue options, and the fact that she was a prize card stirred up quite the storm. Because of her status as a prize card while also being legal in the format, copies of Minerva that you could potentially win at a YCS were going for upwards of $1,000 a copy in her prime, being the first time in a long time a prize card was worth.
And that's for a super rare. That's not the ultra rares. That's super rares. And unironically, this is not gonna matter that much in 2015, but in 2016, like Minerva Lightsworn, I think would actually be a top tier meta threat if more people were able to play it. Like it was a genuinely really good deck during like ABC format, I think. But like it just like only very few people were able to play it.
worth nearly that much outside of specifically a World's Prize card. With all of that preamble out of the way, how did the meta for the YCS shake out? For the most part, the meta held despite the new releases, but a couple of clear shifts had made themselves known immediately. For starters, the Perform Mages were running rampant. Over half of the Nekroz lists and most of everything that wasn't specifically named Burning Abyss were playing the clowns.
See, this is so sick, man. No Jin, no outs to Jin, all that kind of stuff. Just dope ass Nekroz and clowns.
And the results here were clear that Perform Mage was an engine that was here to stay, providing rank 4s and tribute bodies left and right. Yang Zing would see its first ever premier top here, utilizing the new Zephyr Yang Zings from Cross Souls to provide the extra searching power for their creation lines, giving the strategy far more consistency than before.
Masquerade kind of ruined the mirror. Yeah, the Masquerade OTK was a way to play through Valkyris. I think if the format wasn't that long though, right? I think if it had more time, you can probably find ways around it.
Infernoid would quickly adapt to running Decatron, but would take some time before the realization of power that was Imagination, but given time would adjust. Cosmo would be the big shock here, scoring a top cut appearance in its first ever outing. The primary ability it was showcasing at this stage is the ability to access any part of the core through a combination of Slip Rider and Cosmo Town. Because Cosmo Town searches on any card destruction effect, including your own, it would be common practice to use Town's recursion, pop it with Slip Rider, and then search another town, then activate it to do it all again since it lacked a hard once per turn clause. This combined with Forerunner being shockingly difficult to out allowed the deck to see decent success for its first rodeo, and left many players looking to the deck for future outings. Gabriel Orison Wine would take the event on Burning Abyss, utilizing a newer tech in the deck being Absolute King Backjack as a way to combo with Draghig, able to stack a Burning Abyss card, then use Backjack's effect to either mill a specific BA name or set up both Fire Lake and the Traveler lines to absolutely blow out the opponent. YCS Rimney would be held the same day, and we'd see similar results in terms of...
I think this is peak Nekroz format. I think this is what I would go back to if I was going to play Retro Nekroz, which I probably will at some point.
Perform Mage presence, with Perform Mages finding their way into most of the non-BA builds in the top 32, including the winning Nekroz list piloted by Lorenzo Satoni. YCS Monterey would be the following week, and we'd see similar results to the other YCSs in this block, even with the Backjack build of BA once again taking the event piloted by Alan Guzman. The year's Megatins would drop a week later, and to say that the anticipation was palpable would be an understatement, as this particular round was set to reprint a massive amount of the current meta. Archetypes seeing reprints here included Artifact, Bujin, Burning Abyss, Fluffle, Infernoid, Cliffort, Shadal, Sylvan, Tellarknight, Traptrix, and Yang Zings to name a few. Needless to say, this would bring down the price of everything in the meta not named Nekroz, but there was also a new particular card here brought in for the promo slots that absolutely needs to be talked about. Elder Entity Norden is a fusion of two Synchro or Exceeds monsters that revives a level 4 lower on summon. Let's be blunt, at this point in time, you're never fusion summoning this card the correct way. You are absolutely using this with instant fusion, and as such, Norden provides a get out of jail free card to every rank 4 focused deck by turning instant fusion into a 1 card rank 4 with its revive, leading the card to see stable play in any rank 4 focused deck for the foreseeable future. This would lead nicely into the next set 2 weeks later that was poised to take another crack at the deck building set formula.
Norden had like different effects on the format. On the one hand, it made like OTKing with Masquerade through Valk easier. On the other hand, it also made outing specific floodgates a lot easier. Like Mistake, for example, you could like easily instant fusion into a Diamond Direwolf. So it's like it has pros and cons, I think, to the format.
High Speed Riders. Release date, October 2nd, 2015. Set type, deck building set. Major strategies, Speedroid, Resonator, Cyframe. Impact, new engines to tinker with. High Speed Riders would be the second crack at the concept of a deck build set, bringing 3 new archetypes to the table to drop massive waves of support for, with 2 being brand new and 1 being new support for a legacy archetype. The legacy archetype in question was Resonator, the building blocks of Jack Atlas's Red Dragon Archfiend strategy, seeing new tools like Red Resonator, who summons a level 4 lower from hand on normal, or boost your life points by a monster's attack on special, but none of their pieces would convert the strategy into anything worth playing. Speedroid would be the first of 2 new archetypes, a series of wind machines aimed at swarming, level modulation, and accessing a variety of synchros in their toolbox like Kendama, Shanbara, and the previously released Clearwing Synchro Dragon. However, most of these pieces were lackluster and clunky, save for 2 specifically. Speedroid Terratop can special summon itself if you have no monsters, searching another Speedroid on summon, and Taken Tomboard can special summon itself if you control a wind, and contribute itself to special summon a Speedroid tuner from deck. These 2 would form the basics of a rank 3 engine for strategies at the time, thanks to Terratop searching Taken Tomboard for the immediate free summon, giving you rank 3 material without committing to the normal summon, seeing play mostly in decks like Burning Abyss as now a free access to Dante. The last archetype here was Cyframe, a series of psychic gears that
this is the one thing about this here that I don't really like, besides like Jinlock, the fact that there's a lot of engines coming out. I'm just noticing that seems to be a trend in 2015. There's a lot of engines added to the game that require you to run bricks, right? This is like I'm sure there's previous examples, but this year seems packed with the design philosophy of we're gonna make really powerful cards that require you to play really mediocre cards next to them, right? Like we saw Brilliant Fusion with Garnet. We now saw Driver with Gamma, and also the Terror Top Taketomborg, right? This was a sort of dynamic. I was never a fan of this. Even at the time, I hated playing with those cards. I sometimes did play decks with Brilliant Fusion or Taketomborg or whatever. I hated it. I really, really hated it. In terms of that design philosophy, right?
Themselves in response to an opponent's action if you control no monsters, as well as the vanilla Psyframe Driver, banishing both in the end phase. These included Alpha, who responded to a summon and searched a Psyframe card on summon, Beta, who responded to an attack, popping the monster and ending the battle phase, Gamma, who responds to monster effects, negating it and destroying the monster, Delta, with the same effect but for spells, and Epsilon, with the same effect but for traps. Their field spell Circuit allows you to immediately synchro summon using the summon materials regardless of turn, with the primary targets being Zeta, a level 7.
It's so much better when every card is a starter and an extender like now. I didn't say that. That's not what I said.
Who can tempt banish itself and an opponent's attack position special summon monster, able to recur a Psyframe in grave by returning itself from grave to extra deck, and Omega, a level 8 that can tempt banish itself and a card in the opponent's hand, can return a banished card to grave during the opponent's standby phase, and can return itself and another card from grave back to deck. While some experimentation would be seen with the various parts, the only one that would see any success in the short term would be Omega, being a generic 8 with the ability to hand rip, though some experimentation would be seen with the gears as hand traps, specifically in the case of Gamma, though this would go nowhere for the time being. YCS Dallas would be held that same weekend, and a surprising new face would be seen among the decks in the top cut, being Clown Blade, a combination of the popular Performage engine with various rank 4 enablers, such as Assault Halberd and Thousand Blades, with Thousand Blades specifically being interesting as its Grave Revive effect can trigger off the summon of Trick Clown. The other interesting card here would be Gigabyte, seeing its first real playability thanks to Performages all being spellcasters, which in turn rose the usage of the rank 4 King of the Feral Imps, which would only rise further and further in usage as rank 4 toolbox decks fully take over. Eric Christensen would take the event on Infernoid, notably going completely undefeated throughout the event with an impressive 16-0 tear, utilizing the newly released Omega for its hand rip, as well as its ability to remove levels from the board for further Infernoid summons. This would lead us into the last core set of the year, and if it was anything like core before it, it was sure to bring a shakeup to the meta as we knew it.
Oh no. Oh no.
Dimension of Chaos. Release date, November 6th, 2015. Set type, core set. Major strategies, DD, Magispector, Cosmo. Impact, the guillotine to the current meta. Dimension of Chaos would be the last core set of the year, and with its new archetypes and continued support of themes introduced back in core, a couple of new meta threats would rise from this particular set to redefine the meta at large. DD is an archetype of fiends aimed at utilizing fusions, synchros, and exceeds through their various tools and Dark Contract continuous cards, which we've actually seen a couple of times before, but this would be their first major wave of support that would make the strategy playable. Swirl Slime can fuse a DDD using itself and any other material in hand and can be banished from grave to summon a DD from hand. Nekroz Slime can fuse a DDD by banishing itself and any other material from grave. Savant Kepler searches a Dark Contract or bounces another DD card to hand on summon.
Cool
Oblivion King Abyss Ragnarok summons a DDD from grave on summon and contribute another DD to banish an opponent's monster. And then the Scale can summon a DD from grave when you special summon another DD, burning yourself for 1,000 when you do. Wave King Caesar can detach at the end of the battle phase to summon back as many destroyed monsters as you can, but burns yourself for 1,000 for each in the next standby phase, searching a Dark Contract when sent to grave. Wave Oblivion King Caesar Ragnarok can bounce a DD or Dark Contract on attack.
The only complaint I have with DDD is the naming. Like, come on, man.
Opponent's monster and equip it to himself, boosting by its attack. Duo Dawn King Kali-Yuga can stun all other cards on field for the turn on summon, can detach to nuke all spells and traps, and can detach to set a Dark Contract from grave. Dark Contracts are all continuous cards with similar conditions of providing an effect once per turn and burning the controller for 1,000 in the user's standby phase. Gate lets you search a DD, Swamp King lets you fusion summon a fiend using hand or field, and can also use grave if the monster being summoned is a DD, and Witch lets
it has nothing to do with the length of the names, it's just the fact that it's so confusing. I can never remember which one is which. Like, because they all have so similar long-ass names. And one of them is like Wave High King Oblivion Caesar. The other one is just Wave King Caesar. The other one is High King Caesar. Then there's Wave High King Oblivion whatever Caesar. Like, it's just
DD
like,
or Dark
annoying.
Contract from hand to grave to pop a card on field and boost all fiends by 1,000 on the opponent's turn. DD would look interesting from this wave, but unfortunately was missing quite a lot of its important support to do anything relevant for the time being.
Wave Oblivion King Caesar Ragnarok.
As the remainder of their critical support were still locked in the OCG as exclusives needing to be imported. So the deck's viability was going to live or die by how soon.
Yeah, you should make a DDD deck, top with it, and then name it Caesar. Sell it. That'd be funny.
pieces. Reform Age would actually see a couple of new pieces of pendulum support. Mirror Conductor can swap a monster's attack and defense and take 500, or if in scale, drop a special summon monster's attack or defense to the lower of the two. And Plush Fire, if destroyed, floats into another Perform Agent deck, and in scale can summon itself if your Perform Age is destroyed, then you take 500 damage. These two were seemingly harmless additions to the lineup at first, but a realization hit with Plush Fire specifically. If it was, say, destroyed in the Pendulum scale, it would be a monster again in the extra deck where it ended up. This means that by popping Plush Fire in the scale with something like Luster Pendulum or Wavering Eyes, it would still trigger its float effect. And with that, Pendulums now
look at how innocent and cute it looks, but yet it's so broken.
Had full unrestricted access to the Perform Ages in a way no other deck did. This would heavily increase the interest in the aforementioned Pendulum pile, now slowly gaining the name of the two archetypes it most utilized, those being of Perform Ages and Performapals, nicknamed Pepe for short. It seemed that with
Vi, thank you for the 5 months. I think Ice Barrier Runic is something I want to try. I don't have the biggest hopes for it, but I think it's alright. It might be better than Plunder. Yeah, it might be better than Plunder.
every new release, some new Pendulum cards would be added to the pile to make Pepe stronger and stronger, which actually segues really nicely into Magispector was a new archetype of spellcaster pendulums that all shared targeting and effect destruction immunity, and having no pendulum scale effects despite being a pendulum archetype, with most having an effect on summon, with Nekomata searching any Magispector card in the end phase, Bunboku
There's something so odd. Am I the only one? But there's something so odd about seeing a pendulum monster with the empty box. I feel like it's really weird.
searching a monster, Yada searching a spell, and QB searching a trap. Kieran would be the boss of the archetype, able to bounce a pendulum monster and an opponent's monster to hand on quick effect, though notably was a level 6 in a pendulum archetype where the scales capped out at 5. Their spell trap line primarily involved tributing a wind spellcaster to activate an effect, with Storm spinning a monster to deck, Cyclone popping a monster, Tornado banishing a monster, and Tempest negating a special summon or monster effect, destroying it. Lastly, Majesty's Pegasus was the deck's field spell, boosting all Magispectors by 300 and letting you tribute a wind spellcaster to summon a Magispector from deck. The fact that the entire archetype had targeting protection on top of Kieran being an absolute annoyance would lead them to see meta playability not just in their own pure variants, but also as additional pieces to Pepe, thanks to Bunboku and Kieran together forming a self-contained package of monsters. Similarly to Ignite though, they also had an extra deck monster that tied the archetype into the Draco Slayer lore, being Magister Paladin the Ascending Draco Slayer, a rank 4 that searches any pendulum monster in the end phase after being Exceed summoned, and can detach to summon a Draco Slayer from the face-up extra deck, forming a pseudo loop in combination with Ignister Prominence and instantly becoming a staple piece of Pepe thanks to being a rank 4. Speaking of Ignite, Ignite would also receive a couple more pieces here in Cavalier and Veteran, finishing out their sets of level 5s and 6s, as well as Reload, which shuffled back any number of pendulum monsters in hand to draw that many +1, with Reload seeing not only play in Ignites, but experimentation in different pendulum piles. Gradle was a new archetype aimed at stealing opponent's monsters, with most of their main deck monsters equipping to and stealing an opponent's monster when destroyed in battle, or by monster effect for Eagle, spell effect for Alligator, or trap effect for Cobra. Slime could summon itself from hand or grave by popping 2 Gradle cards, summoning a Gradle from grave when you do, providing easy access to their synchro boss Gradle Dragon, able to pop cards up to its synchro materials on summon, floating into another monster in grave on destruction. Lastly, Impact lets you pop a Gradle card in an opponent's card, and searches a Gradle in each end phase, only able to use one of those effects in a turn. Gradle, while seemingly clunky, actually held some interesting applications thanks primarily to the Kaijus from Core, able to tribute over a monster, then steal the Kaiju with a Gradle, seeing some experimentation in that aspect. Speaking of, Kaiju would receive Gamma Seal, now the weakest Kaiju at 2200 attack, making it the new go-to counter option for outing unoutable bosses. And that would become even more relevant with the new wave of Cosmo support. Strawman had the standard pilot tag out and could pay 500 to summon a banished Cosmo with its effects negated, destroying it in the end phase. Wicked Witch had the standard pilot tag out and could pay 1000 to prevent herself from being destroyed that turn on a quick effect, and Dark Destroyer had the standard ship float effect, targeting protection, and pop the monster on summon. These three would take the already tier 3 Cosmo strategy and rocket it up to tier 1, as Dark Destroyer was an absolute house of a card, with the only real way to out it being that of the Kaijus, as popping it would just let it float into another ship or pilot that
we haven't had a ban list that removes Nekroz yet, right? So it would be easy to out this with Trishula. I think Cosmo becomes a problem once we talk about the ban list that removes it.
On to the one-offs.
It's like right
Performapal
after
Second Donkey searches a Performapal on summon if your scales are full, being a decent inclusion in Pepe as it geared up. Fluffle Wings allows you to convert a toy vendor into pure value, drawing a card and popping the vendor, which in turn gets you another search. In the same vein, Frightfur Sabretooth is a fusion of any Frightfur fusion and one or more Fluffle or Edge Imps, summons a Frightfur from grave on fusion summon, boosts Frightfurs by 400, and has destruction immunity if made with 3 or more material. Sabretooth would be seen as effectively a freebie fusion using Tiger, since you could just revive him after, allowing you to either make a large-bodied board Overlord between their attack buffs or potentially clear the Tiger off the board for another Tiger summon. Vector Pendulum the Drake Overlord could negate the effects of the opponent's Pendulum scales while in scale, being a decent option for the Pendulum pile, but still lacked a solid reason to run it, which we would get soon enough. Pot of the Forbidden on flip gave you the choice of effects from power spells that are currently banned, be it Pot of Greed's Draw 2, Giant Drenade's Spell Trap Bounce, Raigeki's Monster Wipe, or Forceful Sentry's Hand Spin Back. Obviously this was too
We need to look at San Jose format being the first Dimension of Chaos YCS and the last YCS before the Nekroz. Oh!
clunky to
So
see
there's
meta
one
contention,
event
but it was experimented with for rogue level play with the previously
with this
mentioned
set, but
prediction
without a
princess
new
cards,
banlist.
as Tyro Tri could use it as her ritual material, then bring it back in the end phase, able to flip it up and down repeatedly. Odd Eyes Fusion summons a dragon using monsters you control, or if the opponent has 2 or more monsters than you, Odd Eyes monsters from the extra deck. This would facilitate the new boss of Vortex Dragon, a fusion of an Odd Eyes and a Pendulum monster that bounces a monster on summon and has an Omni Negate at the cost of returning a Pendulum from the extra to deck. This would be solid for some Pendulum piles to include thanks primarily to Odd Eyes Rebellion Dragon, which 2 copies of it in the extra deck can be used to fully meet the fusion requirements since Odd Eyes Fusion doesn't specify face-up extra deck, seeing some experimentation. Starlight Red Dragon Archfiend's name becomes the original RDA on field and engrave and can nuke all other special summoned monsters with equal or less attack to it to burn the opponent for 500 for each. This would become a quick inclusion in the ever-growing lineup of good level 8 synchros, primarily as a way to close out games effectively. Painful Decision lets you dump a level 4 or lower normal to search another copy of the same monster. While fairly basic on paper, at this stage the only deck that could even remotely consider using it was Ignite, though it would see relevance within the next year. Lastly, Grand Horn of Heaven can negate an inherent special summon in the opponent's main phase, then immediately force them to end that phase. This would see some serious experimentation as a blowout option when going first, as forcing the opponent to effectively skip their main phase 1 can prove detrimental in terms of breaking a board, as you lose your battle phase to go into main phase 2 to finish up. YCS San Jose would be the same weekend, and Cosmo would waste no time letting everyone know who was the new top dog, taking the main slice of the top cut and the event itself piloted by Jesse Samick.
This is interesting. I would think Nekroz would do fine against this deck.
The addition of Dark Destroyer and Strawman to the deck had changed the dynamic substantially, as now you could do combos with the deck by utilizing Dark Destroyer's
I'm looking at it now. I'm looking at this list and I'm like, why does Nekroz struggle here? He shouldn't.
To cycle your ships in the battle phase for further damage pushes, or to break the opponent's board, while Strawman's ability to access a temporary beater body that then floats into more power proved extremely useful. Reasoning had found another home here too, as almost every ship in Pilot was a different level, giving no ideal call outside of 8 to prevent a free Dark Destroyer drop. Magispector would also clear into top 16 here, utilizing the other Pendulum tools like Luster Pendulum and Archfiend Eccentric to take full advantage of the Magispector lines. In addition to Moon Mirror Shield being quite useful, as with the targeting and effect destruction protections on the Magispector lines, it made the smaller bodies incredibly difficult to out without something like a Kaiju, which always felt like a waste on the small Pendulum bodies. This would be the precursor to the next banlist update just 3 days later, and with it would come down the blade on almost everything that had been meta in the past year. Newly banned were Towers, Construct, Exciton, and Shuret, all of which had been pivotal pieces of the decks that had dominated the game for a while.
This is what I meant.
Newly limited were Graph as a hit to BA, Mathematician and El Shaddoll Fusion as hits to Shaddoll, Nekroz and Bryonic and Unicorn, and Rhoda all as hits towards Nekroz, Clipboard Scout as a hit to Klee, and Ulti Kanahawk as a hit to Ritual Beast, all of which were massive nerfs in their own rights. Newly semied, and the only card here, would be Seer as another hit to BA. Lastly, unlimited were Chaos Sorcerer, Shien, Spellbook of Fate, and Gear, seemingly a wave of cleanup to the decks of yesteryear at this point. Shaddoll, Cliffort, Ritual Beast, and Nekroz all suffered killing blows, losing almost their entire identity in one fell swoop, while Burning Abyss, though it did take hits, didn't suffer nearly as much as the others. This would also spawn a meme in the community around Dante, as it seemed that the BA poster child, unlike the faces of the other meta strategies, was banlist immune in the TCG. Obviously, this would set the stage for a changing of the guard in a sense, and most expected Cosmo to move into the dominant position moving forward, which would be all but confirmed at YCS Sao Paulo 3 weeks later, where Cosmo would take a solid 9 of the top 16, including first place piloted by Alejandro Suarez, marking the—
I've never played Cosmo at an event, I think. Actually, I played Fire King Cosmo in 2016 or 17. I don't know exactly. 16. I've played, Fire King Cosmo.
Player's second YCS win and third major event win. This would be the first major event top of Pepe as well, but unfortunately we do not have a deck list to analyze for this particular event. Though Pepe was about to become much more potent in the meta, as the last structure deck of the year was just a week away, and it would provide a preview of the coming attractions that Pendulum had in store for 2016.
Oh, the Magician structure, the Skull Crobat and stuff. Yeah.
Master of Pendulum. Release date.
Oh, this is that time. I remember now why I didn't play Cosmo at the time at a big event. Most likely, it's because they had a YCS in Europe that got cancelled. Right? That was, or was that early 2016? I think there was supposed to be a YCS in France that got cancelled around the time. YCS Lille, I think. Yeah.
December 4th, 2015. Set type.
Yeah, I remember we hosted a replacement event with CCG in Lille. Yeah.
Structure deck. Major strategies.
Well, like not we. I was part of CCG, but I didn't host shit. I didn't do shit. I just went there and played. But
Pal, Odd Eyes, Pendulum Magician. Impact, the precursor to the Clown Show. Master of Pendulum would be the final set of the year, and with it would come one of the biggest bursts of support we had seen yet to Pepe specifically, with the support here breaking down into 3 archetypes, so let's go at it one at a time. Performapal support would be the least in number but one of the largest in power thanks to Performapal Skullcrobat Joker who, on normal, searches a Performapal, Pendulum Magician, or Odd Eyes monster, becoming an instant staple for the deck thanks to accessing any of the 3 engines on command. Odd Eyes would receive a new field spell in Sky Iris, which blocks your Magicians, Performapals, and Odd Eye scales from being targeted and lets you pop a card to search for an Odd Eyes once per turn, and 2 new extra deck bosses in Meteor Burst, who specials a pen scale on summon and locks the opponent's monster effects in the battle phase, and Absolute, who can detach to negate an attack and summon an Odd Eyes from hand or grave, and if sent to grave after being Exceed summons an Odd Eyes from extra deck ignoring its summoning condition, with Sky Iris finding a home instantly, and Absolute taking one of those Odd Eyes fusion slots thanks to also being a cheat out if needed. Lastly, the Pendulum Magician archetype would see a serious facelift. Dragon Pit and Pulse were normal pendulums that could discard a pendulum to pop a spell trap for Pit or a monster for Pulse. Oath Dragon could return a Magician or Odd Eyes from face up extra to hand once per turn. Wisdom Eye could pop itself in scale to set any other Magician into scale from deck, and Pendulum Call, for the cost of a discard, let you search for any 2 Magician pendulums, locking your pen scales from being destroyed by card effect until the opponent's next end phase. This was an incredible boon for the rapidly rising Pepe, seeing a variant known as Pepe Magicians rise into the meta off of this wave, which I would say we'd see at the last YCS of the year in Lyle, but there was an unexpected issue. Due to devastating attacks in Paris coupled with civil unrest, YCS Lyle would sadly be cancelled, leaving us now at the end of 2015 Yu-Gi-Oh! But what a massive year it was. We had seen the rise and fall of new Tier 0, as well as the changing of the guard in terms of meta threats. And with
yeah, Nekroz, what was Nekroz's lifespan? It it felt longer than it actually was, I feel like. It was like 6 months. 9 months? 9 months. Yeah. But it was like, it was very much different different shapes of Nekroz. Like it was definitely a different feeling. It's split in like 2 phases, right? It's like Jin Nekroz and no Jin Nekroz. So yeah.
recent support, finally, we were seeing pendulums come into their own as a mechanic, but this was about to hit the fan. With the beginning of 2016 on the horizon, the clowns were about to get more and more powerful, and with it, we'd see an approach Konami would take that we've never seen before or since to help keep the chaos in check.
All right.
A huge
And that's 2015, everybody. Shoutouts to the Law Yugioh. Very enjoyable as always. The link to the channel is pinned in the chat right now. Go ahead and subscribe to the Law if you enjoy this sort of content. Appreciate you guys for making these, or appreciate you for making these. And pretty good year 2015, I feel like, overall. Jinlock, a little cringe, but we're about to go into 2016 Pendulum, and in comparison to that, 2015 is gonna look pretty nice. So I should revisit 2015 Jinless Nekroz format for Time Wizard at some point. That seems pretty fun.